taking control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all connected but separated, misunderstood and so frustrated. A million armies of one have invaded, watching you and watching me. We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong. I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. We wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere. Watching me. The little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. We the people have taken over. We the people are little brother, standing by to dethrone each other, watching you and watching me. Paranoid, the lens is our weapon, desensitized in our lust for attention, democratized by our voyeur obsessions, watching you and watching me. Slaves to perfection, don't let them project you as you are. Feel your every flaw. I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. I know you're out there somewhere. This is the new totalitarian state. 1,000 eyes are waiting for you to break. Stay in line, don't make a mistake. We're watching. We watched you for so long. We wait for you to fall. We will expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised.
Bumblefoot. Bumblefoot.
Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you, listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott. You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at spacedoutradio.com, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Game on! Game on! Game on!
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
The password is...
Alright.
Okay, seriously, what's with the pointies?
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
Seriously, Dave? Really?
Chloe. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Captain, take your seat on my left. It's time for takeoff.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, start, 2, 1, boost ignition, and liftoff.
Just to be there with you, and I still trip over my feet, and my heart still skips a beat. I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you along for the ride wherever you are on this planet we love to call Earth. I am high and mighty tonight. I'm not allowed to let out this little secret, but I'm going to. Just don't share it with my little girl. You see, I'm pretty happy dad today. My daughter got accepted into university. Yes, I'm pretty happy. She's pretty pumped. I got the news this afternoon, and I can tell you this. I am stoked for my little girl, even though she's not so little anymore at 18. But to know that she's off and running into university, she's going to go for her bachelor's degree in English, I am pretty pumped up tonight. And we're talking Bigfoot as we are live right here in Uncle Jimbo's cabin, right here in the Great White North on this Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning if you're on the East Coast, Wednesday afternoon if you're in good old Australia. Let's welcome in everyone listening in and on spacedoutradio.com, on Spreaker, on the United Public Radio Network, Renegade Talk Radio, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and on Revolution Radio. We do this thing, everyone, every night of the week. Why? Because we want to be your one-stop shop for anything to do with these topics. And of course, we rock in and out of every single show thanks to our resident guitar god, Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy. Yes, Bumblefoot is the official sound of SOR. If you're a social media junkie like I am, I can tell you this. Follow us on Twitter, @SpacedOutRadio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Find us on TuneIn. Download this show and others on iTunes. And, of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. Now, if you want to take part in this show, if you're a first-timer here, we don't take phone calls. You have to sign into one of the chat rooms. Revolution Radio's chat room, Spreaker's chat room, the UPRN chat room, Facebook on the SOR Space Travelers Club, or if you're on Twitter, just go to hashtag #SpacedOutRadio. I will get to your questions and comments in there as well. If you haven't gone to our website and signed up for the SOR Space Travelers Club yet, I'm hoping you do. $5 a month, that's it. Cheaper than a Starbucks large coffee. I don't know the coffee name of that, I'll just call it a large. And your name gets entered in a monthly prize draws. We have a special section for your postings on our website and much more coming for you. Hey, we're going to give you a hell of a lot more than just access to our archives. While on our website, check out my latest blog, Eric Markham's SOR Spacewire. And if you've had a sighting you can't explain, fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Researcher Mike Schmidt is right there waiting for you to fill one out. He wants to do the dirty work to find out what's going on with you. All personal information is 100% confidential. We say hello to everyone listening in on the United Public Radio Network, live on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you with us. If you're listening in on Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, yes, we are live right now in Sin City, my home away from home. And of course, if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember, the Double R Machine is the largest non-profit online radio station going today. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. We're heading into the forests of Cascadia tonight, where we have a pair of guests coming on to discuss the legend of Bigfoot. Now, for many eyewitnesses, Sasquatch isn't a legend, but reality. He's very real. Very, very real when it comes to First Nations communities who've always believed that there's been a big hairy beast roaming around the forest, from trying to abduct women to taking children from their parents. The stories are long and well told over the decades by elders, many of whom believe if you show Sasquatch respect and no ego, he'll just let you be. Todd Neiss has been a Bigfoot researcher for more than 2 decades. A decorated veteran living in Oregon, Todd has come face to face with this creature that put him on this incredible journey. Since then, he has worked with the best in the field, from Jeff Meldrum to John Bindernagel and many Discovery Channel documentaries in between. He's a believer in the creature on the West Coast. Todd will be with us for the first 2 hours. In hours 2 and 3, we are going to be joined by Todd's research buddies, Tom Sewid. And Tom is a rarity, as many First Nations don't really talk publicly about Sasquatch. But Tom, who swam with orcas and has 30 years of studying Bigfoot, believes this is one creature that does exist and needs to be taken a little bit more seriously. So for the first hour alone, we got Todd Neiss. Todd, welcome to Spaced Out Radio. How are you?
Oh, thank you, Dave. I'm great, and appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate you coming on too, my friend, because I'm a big Bigfoot guy. I really am. You know, as someone who has experienced a sighting of 2 of the creatures, this is something that is very important to me, because when you have that experience, Todd, you know as well as I do, you definitely need to take a step back and replay that situation in your mind, wondering what the hell it was you actually saw. So go back in time for us, if you don't mind, Todd, and let us know, did you believe in Bigfoot your entire life, or did you feel that it wasn't until you had your experience that this creature was a real living being?
Well, I think the best way to approach that is to do it the way I did at the conference here at Squatchfest this last weekend. And that is to say, I don't believe in Bigfoot. I do not believe in a large, hair-covered, legendary beast roaming the earth. And like yourself, having seen them, you don't believe they exist. You know they do. And there's a big, big difference. But yeah, it was a huge epiphany for me. And to answer your question, no, I didn't believe in these things prior to this. So I guess I was a bit of an agnostic, if you will. I really didn't care one way or the other. So I made that jump from agnostic to knower, and that's no credit to myself. I didn't have a choice in the matter. It was right place, right time. I just can't help believe that it was fate, and it absolutely changed my life. And I keep, reflecting on, how can it be that just 25 seconds of my entire existence absolutely turned my world upside down? I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have gone so many different places. I wouldn't have met so many amazing people and done these expeditions, and all but for 25 seconds. It's amazing.
And Todd, I know exactly what you're talking about. My Bigfoot experience was a little bit longer because a friend of mine and I, when we had our sighting in September of 2013, he lives in the backwoods of a place called Mission, British Columbia, which I know you're familiar with. And literally, he was taking me into the back forest behind his 10-acre farm to show me where he had a paranormal experience as a youngster playing cops and robbers with his buddy way in behind the forest. And that's where we saw the first one doing the peering from in behind the tree and out. We could see the face, then the face would disappear, then we'd see the face and shoulder, then the head would disappear, but the shoulder was still there. And that lasted about 4 or 5 minutes. And it wasn't until we started to turn to go back down the path that we saw the second one at about 85 feet away from us. And that's where I got the full right and back profile of it. And it had that really reddish-brown fur, if you can call it fur, or is it hair? I really don't know. But when we had that experience, the second one tripped me out a little bit more than seeing the first one peering behind the trees, because you don't know how big they are until you see them. You don't understand the power that it has in playing with your mind, trying to figure out and process seeing something that you are not supposed to believe in, or that is not supposed to exist. It really plays. And we often talk on this show, Todd, about how are you going to react? Because, you've heard it all before. Oh, why didn't you grab your camera? Why didn't you take pictures? Why didn't you run after it? You don't do that in those situations, do you?
Well, you're in shock. I mean, seeing something like that, and you make a good point. I mean, your very essence of reality is it's completely being assaulted, and you're traumatized. I know when I watched these, and I saw 3. I don't know if your listeners know that, but I saw 3 of these creatures at one time. And, there's this mental process you go through, which frankly begins with denial. And it's very short-lived because you're trying to, you want to make it into something that makes sense, but within really a matter of seconds, it is what it is, and so, I mean, I can't unsee these things if I wanted to, nor would I, but I can see them as clearly today as if I was there. And that trauma, I mean, I tell people it's like you get inducted into this club, and it's a club you cannot sign up for. It's one that you are unceremoniously dragged into, and don't get me wrong, I don't regret it at all. It's really, like I say, it's changed my entire life, and I wouldn't take it back for a minute. But no, your sighting sounds fantastic.
It was nice and close. Thomas Steenberg actually gave me a little bit of a hard time about it, because Thomas on the best of days, as we all know him, is as lovable and as affable as he is crusty.
Well, he's a skeptic, yes. and I'll tell you, as is my wife, Diana. I mean, that's really been her tack on this thing is she's a pretty tough cookie, and as is Tom Steenberg. But I've known Tom for years. In fact, he was on our expedition, and we can get into that later. But the one we had back in September up in British Columbia. But yeah, you're right. He's heard those. But he gets a lot of that from his very close association with the late Renee DeHinnon, and they were very close. And I've always said if you looked up the word cantankerous in the dictionary, there would be Renee's picture, because he was pretty crusty himself.
Oh, for sure. And, Thomas, when he's come on this show, he's just no BS. Let's just get to it. And, for somebody who's been going that long, I'm really surprised he hasn't had a sighting of his own, because maybe that would kind of change him a little bit. And not saying that he needs to change, because I like Tom. He's been on this show a couple of times, and, when I lived in Mission, he was still quite open, like, hey, Dave, when are you coming over to see some prints and everything? So he's very matter-of-fact about it, which is really cool. He doesn't have to be, but he is. But when you look at researchers around the world, and, since these television shows have come into play, and we're going to get into that more and more later on in the night, but has it changed what you do, Todd, out in the field with the discovery of the popularity of television?
Not at all. I mean, quite frankly, I have to put that aside. I mean, when I see, these programs coming out of the woodwork, to be honest with you, I'm very disappointed. I mean, I know these companies have to, obviously sell advertising, and sensationalism sells. But there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of ethics involved, and I try to stay at arm's reach from that, because what I do and what my wife and I do together with the Conservancy, we don't try to draw in the cameras. We don't try to be very public about it. In fact, most of what we do is very private. But yeah, like I say, these things are coming out of the woodwork, and I'll say this much: I've turned down a whole lot more offers than I've ever accepted, and I've learned that over the last 24 years, because I've seen what the editing can do. You could give a 30-minute or an hour interview, and they parse it down to 5 minutes, and they can chop it any way they like, and they make it sound like you're saying something you're not even saying. So I'm very, let's just say, cautious when I am approached to do anything like that.
Getting back to you for a second, you mentioned how that 25 seconds changed your life. How did it change you? Did it change your total life's perspective? Did it put you, I realize it put you on a path trying to figure out what it was that you truly saw, but how did it change you as a person?
I'm really glad you asked that, because nobody does. I mean, I will say, with one exception, the last documentary, at least prior to the one we have in production right now, that I did was a couple of years ago. I got called by a guy named Christopher Maloney, and he said, I'm doing this documentary, and it's about cryptozoological creatures and blah, 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 and I heard about you. I want you to be on the show. And the first thing I said, which I always say, is, what's the punchline? And he goes, what do you mean? I go, I've been around. I know. Are you taking this seriously, or how are you handling this? And he said, well, for starters, I'm really not interested in your encounter at all. And I go, okay, now you got my attention. And what he did, what Chris put together, was exactly what you're saying. It was really a study about how, not so much the sightings themselves. I mean, of course, he touched on them, but it was about how it affected people. And I really appreciate that, because nobody's ever done that. So I appreciate what your question. It's very personal. I will say this: when I lost sight of these things again after about 25 seconds or so, I just kind of collapsed back in the back seat of this Humvee military vehicle, and my mind was racing with, oh my God, I've seen something that's scientifically, historically important. How can I possibly sit on this? And at that particular point in time, I'm active duty now, but back then I was a traditional guardsman, so I did the 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks in the summer kind of thing. But I had a civilian life, and at that time I was a vice president of a shipping company. I was a family man, and in the military I was a non-commissioned officer, and I really worked hard for my reputation. And I'm, as I run through this laundry list of who can I tell, you just keep coming back to this ridicule factor and the fact that there's no way I can prove it anyway, right? So I put myself in the same place that I'm sure some of your listeners and many eyewitnesses have been, and that was, keep your mouth shut. You can't prove it. What's the point? And are you going to risk people questioning your credibility or even your sanity? I mean, it's a really hard thing to go through. And, I've often joked that I someday I want to start a support group, for Bigfoot victims. I don't know how you call it, eyewitness victims, because I know it's like you've borne witness to something that's absolutely phenomenal. And you want to say something, but you can't. And because of the amazing impact it has and would have on society as a whole, you find yourself in a place where, you feel like you got to keep quiet, and it's hard. And I know that. And I'll just add this, Dave, real quick, is the fact that I've seen these beings, and I'll leave it at that, has helped me immensely, both in my research, expeditions I've done, as well as investigations and talking to people who have shared this trauma, this traumatic experience, because it really is. So when somebody approaches me or somebody's directed to me about, giving me their testimony about what they've seen, the first thing I do is I say, hey, before you even get started, I need to tell you something. Back in 1993, blah, 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 blah. And it has never failed me to this day, and I think, frankly, it gives me an advantage over other investigators who haven't had, shared that experience with eyewitnesses, because once they find out that you're in that club, right? Once they find out you're in that fraternity, again, that you can't sign up for, it's amazing how much they open up. They want to compare stories, and it's like, they really, really open up, and it's like it's like they've known you all their life, and so it's been very beneficial that way. And as far as field research, I'll say this: there's a different perspective when, let's say, quote unquote, believers go into the woods versus, and I hate the term, but knowers, okay? People that have, like yourself, who have seen these things, there's a whole different perspective, because when you go into the woods and you want to believe they exist, and you're looking for whatever you can find in terms of evidence or or hopefully a sighting in itself, versus somebody who is approaching this entire study with the knowledge that they're there, period. I think it changes the way you research. I think it makes you, you're going in with an awareness that people that haven't seen these things don't have.
I would fully agree with that. And to take it one step further, I didn't know that yours happened on a military training session.
Oh, yeah.
So, do you mind going into detail about that?
Oh, not at all. And I think, there's a number of factors that make this particular sighting unique. 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. But one was, the activity, because it's quite unusual to be out in the woods detonating hundreds of pounds of explosives. 2, multiple animal sightings, as you know, are fairly rare. You were very fortunate to see the 2 you did. But normally it's a single animal and it's a very, very brief thing. 3, as it would turn out, and I'll get to how it did, but we ended up, I say we because it ended up that there were 4 eyewitnesses, and those are just the ones that came forward. So multiple eyewitnesses, multiple animals, and a very unusual set of circumstances. So let me just take your listeners back to that day, April 3rd, 1993. Again, at that point, I'm a member of a combat engineer team. What we do involves a lot of explosives. And for purposes of realism, once a year, we had to detonate, pretty large amounts. We're talking hundreds of pounds of dynamite, C4, ammonium nitrate, TNT, that kind of stuff, all kinds of different explosive compounds. And so to do that, we couldn't actually do it on the base, although we did have a blasting area. We practiced with very small amounts. But again, to make it real, we had to get somewhere where we could do some larger explosions. So that we had an agreement with this timber company, which was just east of the coastal town of Seaside, Oregon. So we're talking the very northwest corner of the state of Oregon. And this particular company owned a very large, almost half the county, in fact, tract of mountainous timberland. And in their holdings there, they had several gravel quarries, and that's what we would use because we can detonate this, and although we're creating an explosion, it would be contained within the quarry, and we didn't have to worry about setting the woods on fire or anything. And so it was that day we had 3 quarries that we were going to visit. At the first quarry, we did cutting charges. We would take composition 4, C4, plastic explosives, and cut steel I-beams. The second one, we had a mock minefield, and that's one of the things we do is if there's a minefield, we have to breach a path through that minefield in order to let our troops get through. The third site was a cratering charge, and that's where we would simulate, say, blowing a road in half and basically denying the enemy use of that road. So our mission is mobility, counter-mobility. So we're blowing up bridges, we're putting bridges in, we're blowing up minefields, we're putting in minefields, we're, blowing up roads and so on. It's just all about the movement. And so we had gotten to this third site, and we had about 250 pounds of ammonium nitrate that we had been soaking in diesel fuel for, several hours. And this is the same explosive that was used on the Murrow building in Oklahoma City, which took the entire face of the building off. Very powerful stuff. So we had put this into the location, lit the fuses, and standard operating procedure was, we had like 11-minute long fuse. We got in the vehicles, we're convoying down the hill, we get to a safety staging area, and we wait for the explosion. It was while we were in convoy to that staging area where the vehicle I was in the second of, there were 4 vehicles, 2 Humvees, a covered troop transport, and then the commander's Humvee in the very back. I was in the second Jeep. I was sitting behind the driver, and it was a very bright, sunny day. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, our last detonation for the day. And this is a Saddle Mountain hunting unit, and I had hunted deer and elk, so it was very natural for me to be looking around the countryside to, look for elk or deer or, whatever wildlife I could see. We rounded this corner, and suddenly the second blasting site, a rock quarry of this light gray basalt rock, came into view, and there, standing right out in the open in that quarry, I see these 3 very dark.
Really dark. Are you still there? Do we still have you on the phone line? I hope you didn't hit mute on your phone there. I wonder if we got to call Todd back. Let's call Todd.
Wearing any clothes.
Oh,
I mean, these things were enormous, and they were built like bodybuilders.
Todd,
they were either jet black or very, very dark brown. But if I could describe the silhouette, the head sat squarely on the shoulders. In fact, the deltoid muscles, I guess is what you call them, the side of the neck, just kind of blended right into the shoulders. The arms are way, way too long. I think of those old Stretch Armstrong, I'm dating myself, but those Stretch Armstrong toys where you
I had one of those. I had one.
Okay, so you know what I mean? Where you can stretch the heck out of them and stuff. This was like their arms were stretched way low. I mean, they were below their knees. The legs were stretched out, too, because the legs were way too long. But I'm talking shoulders almost 5 feet across. I'm talking barrel-chested. But I noticed a very distinct, on all 3 of them, a distinct taper from this barrel chest down to the waist. I mean, these guys would have made any NFL team in a minute.
Hey, Todd, I hate to cut you off here for a second.
Sure.
Okay. During that explanation, when you were explaining about when you came into the quarry and there were the 3 there, literally your phone went dead for about 20 seconds. And I was debating whether or not. So do you mind just repeating what you saw? Because I'm getting everybody in my chat rooms is like, stop, he has to go back. That's the good part.
Okay, where'd we leave off? I'm sorry, I'm up at our cabin in the mountains, and the reception isn't all that great.
That's okay. You were talking about you pulling up to the quarry, and you saw the 3 beings standing there.
Okay. All right. So anyway, we... So this backdrop, if you will, was this light gray basalt. They use these quarries to make gravel for when they punch new roads into their timberland. And I'm going to step outside and see if that doesn't help the reception.
Well, you're sounding great now.
Okay, good. It's trying to snow here. Anyway, these silhouettes that I saw, these 3 silhouettes with this light gray backdrop, they just stuck out like a sore thumb. And again, my initial impression was, what the hell are those people doing there? Because my concern was we had this bomb ticking off, and they might have been potentially within, danger of at least some fallout from the explosion. But I didn't even get to finish the thought. It was like, what are those? And they weren't people. And psychologically, I'm like, tell me those are 3 bears all standing up. But it just, the whole concept was ridiculous. And I was left to accept ultimately. And again, this happened in pretty rapid succession. But I mean, within about 4 or 5 seconds, I was just left to accept what I'm looking at. And I can't unsee it. And what I saw were 3 huge creatures, not wearing a stitch of clothing, very dark in color, black or very, very, very dark brown. The one in the middle stood there like a statue, but very clearly defined silhouette-wise. I estimate that one stood somewhere between 8 and 9 feet in height. Now, the 2 to its left and to its right, if you will, were, I'm going to guess, maybe 7 feet. They came up to the shoulder, about the shoulder of the big one in the middle. Now, I mentioned the one in the middle stood there like a statue, but the 2 on flanking left and right of this thing did anything but. These 2 creatures on either side of the big one in the middle were, how can I say this, rocking back and forth. They were shifting weight from right foot to left foot, back to the right foot, back to the, and in the process, their long arms hanging well below their knees were swinging along with them. And it was the most peculiar thing. If I ever thought they were people, that clinched it. And I have had the opportunity to talk to primatologists. One in particular, I can think of Dr. Henner Fehrenbach, who told me that that's a very common trait with most primates when they feel very excited or agitated, that they will just simply rock back and forth, and like I say, in the process, their arms will swing accordingly. And I've sat there again, watched this for better part of 25 seconds. Again, the one in the middle just stood there like a rock. But anyway, 25 seconds later, we round a corner. I lose sight of them. Maybe a minute later, we pull into the staging area. And at that point, I decided to, since there were a couple trucks behind us still coming in, I decided I'm going to run back up the road. Hopefully I can get another view of them. I so desperately wanted to see them again. And I got, 100 yards or so away. And when we do these exercises, we also have what we call 100% accountability, which means that because of the danger of what we're doing, everybody's accounted for. Nobody leaves the group. And I got to a point where I realized if I'm going to go far enough to see these things, I'm going to be out of sight of the group, and that's not going to go over very well. But I got to this point. I'm standing on my tiptoes. I got my hand to my forehead, and I'm trying to look over this knoll that blocked my view of the quarry. And as I'm standing there doing that, I hear somebody say, "Hey, Neiss." And I look to my right, and here comes Sergeant Martin. And I looked at him. I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "What are you looking at?" I said, "Oh, nothing." And Jeff continued to come toward me. And I worked with Jeff for years, been with him in the unit for, probably 4 years at that time. And he's smoking on a cigarette. He walks up to me and he says, "I don't suppose you saw what I saw at the second blast site." And I'm like, "I don't know, Jeff. What did you see?" I mean, I wasn't going to say it. And he looks left and right, takes another drag off his cigarette. He makes sure nobody else is in earshot, and he says, well, I saw 3 huge, hair-covered Bigfoot, I guess. And, of course, at that, I just... So, I don't know. I don't know if relieve's the right word. I mean, it was great to have that corroboration, but I certainly didn't need it. Again, I couldn't unsee what I saw, but man, it was kind of nice to know that somebody else saw it. And I mentioned earlier that there were 4 eyewitnesses. Again, because we were traditional guardsmen, when we got back together the next month, this would be May of 1993, 2 more soldiers independently, and I don't think they even knew that Jeff and I had seen these things, but 2 other soldiers came forward and also admitted to seeing them. So that's the story, and that's how my life got changed, and that's what's brought us here.
How relieved were you when you all of a sudden had your sergeant come up to you and kind of give this? I mean, did you just... The stress of having this type of sighting, whether it's Bigfoot, whether it's aliens, or whatever it is that is totally abnormal, it is stressful. Did you feel a giant sense of relief when all of a sudden he kind of, in an inadvertent way, patted you on the back verbally and said, yeah, we're together on this, brother?
No, Dave, I don't think so. I think, if anything, what it did was it took me back to that point where I found myself in a conundrum as to whether I should come forward or not. And it made me rethink that, again, for me to say, yeah, I saw what I saw, but I can't, there's just no way I can prove it. The best I could hope for is that anybody that knows me, that knows this non-commissioned officer, that knows this family man, that knows me as a friend socially, that knows me as the vice president of the shipping company, is going to know that I've never, ever, ever, ever come out and said anything that even approaches this, But there again, that ridicule factor. So if anything, I would say that it gave me some confidence to perhaps be more willing to discuss it publicly. And I don't mean in terms of going out and looking for publicity. I'm just saying between myself and my father, a few close friends that I probably wouldn't have said anything to, it gave me that confidence to come forward and chat with them, which in and of itself became fortuitous, because what I found out over the years is that it's amazing how many people I've known for years that have had similar situations. One of the 2 most interesting comments I ever get, and it's kind of funny, but if I'm talking about this in a public setting, let's say I'm at a restaurant or at a bar or whatever, or just a group of people, and I start talking about this, it seems, I can't even count how many times somebody in the background's got an ear open, and when they hear what I'm talking about, I've had them come up to me and say, excuse me, I don't mean to bother you, but were you just talking about Bigfoot? I'm like, yeah. And I get one of 2 things. And that is, either you know who you need to talk to, because it seems like so many people I've known for years at least know somebody who has seen something, who has said something, or I get, you're probably going to think I'm crazy. And then I'm like looking for a pen and some paper. I'm like, okay, here we go again. In that sense, it's it just, like I say, it never ceases to amaze me. I run into people everywhere. I'm sure you do too. You know, that it'll come from out of nowhere, but there are a lot of people out there. And if there's anything I can do to help your listeners, anybody listening tonight, is assure them that they're not alone. And I know that what you've been through is traumatic, and you may be embarrassed, in fact, by it. But don't be embarrassed. Don't be ashamed. And don't feel like you're alone. And know that there are people you can talk to. You know, I'm one of them. I'm one of a lot of people. But we need that information that you have. We need, you know, even if you're not 100% sure, you know you saw something, and it's hanging heavy on you. And just know there are people out there. There are organizations like the American Primate Conservancy that are standing by and waiting to hear what you have to say. So,
Todd, in my area up here, and I wish my investigator Mike would come on and tell this story. But when we found a couple of prints, Mike found the first one, and then about 5 days later, we found a second one about 150 yards away, about 5 inches shorter than the original one. Couple weeks after that, Mike was actually out driving around in the backwoods of where I live up here in northern British Columbia, and he runs into a conservation officer who will keep nameless. I don't even know the gentleman's name. And Mike had run into him a few times because Mike's an avid hunter, and so they started up a chat, and the guy says, "Well, Mike, what are you doing out here today?" And Mike goes, he's like, "Oh, God, how do I tell him I'm out looking for Bigfoot prints?" So Mike just said, just put it bluntly. He goes, "I'm out looking for footprints." And the guy said, "Well, what kind?" And Mike said, "Well, I'm looking for Sasquatch prints." Now, Mike's thinking he's going to get ridiculed here. He's thinking he's going to get, laughed at.
Right.
Well, there's a 30-minute conversation that went along with that. And the gist of that conversation was this young conservation officer saying, "I know nothing, I see nothing, and that's all I'm going to admit to. But, off the record, there's some strange things that I have seen and heard in these forests around here. But if I do let you know, or if I come out about it, I will be fired. I will lose my job." Why do you think, then, that in a story such as that, where we're getting firsthand information from a conservation officer who's out in the wilderness every day, that's his job, and up here, there's hunters everywhere, every single day, why do you think that they would be so conservative about their approach on what they can and cannot say for the fear of their job?
Well, good question. I will say this. I am about the farthest person you'll find as a conspiratorialist. I've heard these arguments before, and I'm not saying that you're setting up a straw man, so to speak, but I can't help it. I keep going to Occam's razor. The simplest answer is normally the truth. And so we can complicate this with emotions and all sorts of conspiracies, but I doubt very much there's a concerted effort by the government to cover this up, per se. Again, I keep going back to the mental anguish that I went through as far as coming forward, and wondering if in doing so that, again, people would question my credibility and my, senility, and integrity is something that is to be earned, and it can be lost in a moment if somebody was to say something out of sorts like, "Hey, I saw this, I saw that, I found this, whatever." I don't think there's any more of I don't think the government stands anything to gain or lose by keeping this quiet. I suppose if anybody would, and again, I'm not a conspiratorialist, but it would be those that stand to lose the most, and which may very well be the logging industry, for instance. But the truth is the truth. And, just as much as we don't control the encounters, I mean, well over 90% of the encounters were never done or, experienced by people that were going out there trying to make that happen. It's on their terms. So no matter what the government or industry wants to do, if and when these things want to make themselves known, it's going to happen. But I think they are very selective, and I don't think, I think they measure people. I think they're smart. I think they have a higher intellect than most people give them. And I'll give you for instance. In the case of my sighting, now picture this. You got about 60 troops invade your neighborhood, and they're planting bombs. Okay? And I'm talking some big stuff. I mean, I remember that second blast, which was at the site where these things were ultimately seen an hour later. That thing put up a mushroom cloud. That was like 110, 120 pounds of C4 plastic explosives. I remember seeing it from a distance, and it put up a big mushroom cloud. And I'm thinking anything anywhere near that is going to be going 360 degrees away from that, right? You'd expect that. So tell me why an hour or so later, in the very same spot, I mean, I'm sure you could still smell the residue of the explosives. Why 3 of these creatures returned to the scene of the crime? And I have my theories. That theory is that they were curious. Their curiosity was piqued by the fact that their world was rocked. Now, I think it takes a lot of intelligence to overcome the fear and the trauma of experiencing something like that, where the ground shook and there was a fireball and there was a mushroom cloud, to come back to that very same location. Am I wrong?
I wouldn't expect him to be there. Not at all.
So here's the analogy I come up with. You're in Mission, yeah?
Not anymore. I'm way up north, about 4.5 hours north of Mission, if you're driving.
All right.
In kilometers, not miles.
Okay. Thank you. So let's just imagine for a minute, and maybe your listeners can imagine as well, that you're sitting on your porch, assuming you have a porch, but you're at home. And out of the blue, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you hear this roar, and then you hear this explosion, and then you feel the ground shake, and you look out the window, and you see a fireball. And what has just happened was a jet airliner crashed 10 blocks from your house. Now, you're going to be traumatized. You're going to be in shock. You're going to wonder if there's another one behind it. But you're just going to be like, oh my God, my neighborhood just blew up. But I can't help but think that after you flipped on the news, in our case, and caught wind of what happened, so a plane fell out of the sky, and yet it's only 10 blocks away. I would think the majority of us would be drawn to that, to want to at least check it out, to want to see if it perhaps injured anybody or anybody's house that we know of. Or maybe just morbid curiosity, who knows? Or, hey, maybe I can help. I don't know. But, I mean, that's the kind of intelligence you're not going to find in a deer or a bear or a raccoon. You know what? You see where I'm going?
I know exactly where you're going.
We as humans, because we're intelligent and because we're curious and we want to know, we need to fill in that question. We find ourselves drawn even to the most dramatic situations because we want to understand. And when I see these things do what they did, having the curiosity piqued, being able to put their fear aside and coming right back to the scene of the crime because they want to understand, that tells me a lot. That tells me these things, these beings, these creatures, whatever you want to call them, they're smart. They're smart, and they're curious, and there's something to be appreciated. They are so different than any other creature out there.
My friend, I'm going to get you to hold on here for a couple of seconds because we are about to go to our first break of the night. Todd Neiss is our guest. He is a Bigfoot researcher out of the state of Oregon. You've probably seen him on some Discovery Channel documentaries in regards to this subject, and more documentaries coming out. He's one of the most knowledgeable people on this subject and respected researchers going around today. In the next hour, we're going to be joined by Todd's good friend, Tom Sewid. He's going to join us as well. We're going to talk some Bigfoot. You're listening to hour number 1 out of the way, hour number 2 coming right up.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
Looking for news beyond the mainstream news? Head to spacedoutradio.com and check out the SOR Spacewire. This is Spaced Out Radio's Eric Markham, news director for the SOR Spacewire. Daily, I will bring you intriguing stories and outlandish reports from what's going on around the world. UFO sightings, paranormal activity, conspiracies, alternative health, and so much more. And if you have news, email me at news@spacedoutradio.com.
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Had a run-in with ghosts, maybe Bigfoot, or seen lights in the sky? Hi, I'm Mike Schmidt from the SOR Sightlines. I'm here to investigate your sighting. Head to spacedoutradio.com and fill out a report on the Sightlines. All your information is 100% confidential, and I will help you figure out what you've been seeing. File your report, and let's find out the answers together.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit, and expect a miracle.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Have you got your Cosmic Passport? If you need one, tune in to Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Weekend. This is Elizabeth Anglin, ET experiencer, spirit medium, and host of Cosmic Passport. Each weekend I'll be bringing you interviews and support from other paranormal experiencers, and the best in intuitive spiritual guidance from across the globe. It's all happening starting at 9 p.m. Pacific Time, midnight Eastern, on spacedoutradio.com.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest. From Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Oh, there's only one way to rock. Loud and proud. In high definition. Radio 702 rocks. Las Vegas.
Every Saturday and Sunday night, as Dave Scott wanders aimlessly in the wilderness, you can come hang out with me, James Tyson, in Spaced Out Weekend. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I'll take you along as we talk with some of the best experts in their fields. SpacedOutRadio.com is the place to find us. So sit down, relax, put your feet up. Enjoy the topics like the paranormal, supernatural, intuitiveness, and so much more. Hope to see you there.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back for the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you along for the ride tonight. Tomorrow night on the show, I'm excited for this one. Brett Butler. Yes, Brett Butler, the comedian, the actress, the psychic, is going to join us. Yes, Grace Under Fire, if you remember that 90s show. That Brett Butler. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time, spacedoutradio.com is the place to be to hear this one. It's going to be a good show. Hey, we want to welcome in everyone listening in on the United Public Radio Network, live on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you with us. We're also live in Las Vegas. Yes, Renegade Talk Radio. Sin City has us broadcasting through the night. Good to be on with you guys as well. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslip.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set an impossible password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. I don't even know where to go with this one. Otorhinolaryngologist. Otorhinolaryngologist? I have no clue. I want to see him use it in a sentence. Anyways, Bill sets a password each and every night on the SOR Space Travelers Club, and make sure if you're a member, you use it wisely. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Also use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio to connect with me right and direct, because you're right in the middle of my screens. You can also give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. Tune us in on TuneIn, download this show and others on iTunes, and our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of guests for you, plethora of information, and a plethora of things for you to check out. So make sure you do that, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. Tonight we are talking Bigfoot. Todd Neiss is with us all the way from Oregon. Todd, welcome back.
Thank you.
You wanted to finish up something before we brought up Tom on the phone line.
Well, yes. So I have to say this, and I find it kind of humorous, but being a non-believer, an agnostic, if you will, made believer, or no, beyond that, a knower, I found when I came back to my civilian job that for the first time since high school, I made my way to a library and checked out every book I could find on the subject of Bigfoot. Reason being, I wanted to find the newest, latest, greatest information, the most modern information about these creatures. And after I had digested that, it dawned on me, I don't know, it must have been 4 or 5 months later, that we as Europeans have experienced these creatures for, 200, 250 years at the most, at least on this side of the country. And yet here's a population of humans who have spent the better part of 14,000 years, going back to, 12,000 BC, who have lived symbiotically with these creatures, 14,000 years versus 250. I just couldn't help myself but to try to go after and look for the oldest references I could. And in the process, I was given a book by the late Ray Crow, the founder of the Western Bigfoot Society, and a dear friend of mine. This book written by an individual named Ellie Clark. It was written back in the 1950s, and what they found was that a lot of these scouting missions that the cavalry were using as they were exploring the western frontier, they brought along not only biologists to try to interpret and understand the animals that they were discovering, but botanists to draw pictures of and appreciate the new plants they were finding, but they brought along historians as well. And their job was to try to break through to the elders of these tribes, because what they discovered, where biology and the flora and the fauna are going to continue to give you a report, they were finding that a lot of these tribes were dying out. A lot of them from diseases they had no immunity from, and along with them, because they didn't have a written language, that their history was being passed by word of mouth from generation to generation, from elder to elder, that this history is going to be lost. So that's when the Army, the military, the people I work for, and I work in the archive sections, ironically, to this day right now, for the military, that they put these people out there to find out the history, the verbal history of what these people knew. And he gave me a book, and it was called Indian Legends of the Pacific Northwest. And it was one of a series of books she wrote, but she had went through the Smithsonian to get access to these historical records and put together these books. So he gave his book, and it was not a book about Bigfoot. It wasn't a book about anything but just Native American lore. And so I got these sticky notes, these little yellow 3M sticky notes. And I thought, I'm going to just, if I happen to stumble across something that sounds like Bigfoot, I'll just kind of, tab the page. I didn't get halfway through the book before I ran out of sticky notes. And the amount of information I found that there was no question in my mind related to these beings. They didn't think of them as animals. They thought of them as another tribe. They called them the first ones. They called them the old ones because they were there before them, before they even came on scene. But they treated them like another tribe, which has really affected my way of thinking in terms of, are we dealing with a great ape or are we dealing with a relic hominid? And I'm starting to lean toward the latter. But anyway, with that, I have to say meeting Tom Sewid was an incredible stroke of luck. He and I participated in a documentary over 20 years ago, and I only ran into him again about 3 years ago at the Sasquatch Summit held at the Quinault Indian Reservation. And it was one of these deals where we're like looking at each other, crossing each other's paths all weekend and go like, I know that guy. But neither one of us wanted to say anything. And finally, Tom got up the courage and says, aren't you Todd Neiss? And I said, yeah. And he goes, I thought so. We were on this documentary. Well, we've been in touch ever since, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful reunion and a great relationship that we've formed. Tom is a real treasure and a wonderful friend, I must say. But to get, like you say, to get Native American people to open up to non-Native American people is very difficult. And Tom has proven to be more than cooperative with not only myself but others, and was very instrumental in the expedition that we embarked on last September, dubbed Operation Sea Monkey. So anyway, I just want to kind of preface that because, Tom spent most of his life in the Broughton Archipelago, which is a collection of very small islands up off the coast of British Columbia between the mainland and Vancouver Island, lived there on these islands and had a tremendous amount of native encounter stories that go back centuries. And so I just wanted to preface it with that. And so with that, I'll defer to you.
All right, let's you're going to hear a ringtone here because we're going to call Tom up. And Tom's going to join us for this coming hour and the following hour right after this. Let's see how long it takes us. There it is.
Hello.
Just one ring tonight. Tom, how you doing? This is Dave from Space Out Radio.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. We got Todd here with us as well for this hour.
Boy, hi, Todd. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to have you aboard.
So,
good to be here.
Before we get into what Bigfoot actually is, in your opinion, gentlemen, Tom, let's learn a little bit about you. You're a fellow British Columbian here who does a lot of Bigfoot research all over North America. Take us back to your experiences when you first learned about Sasquatch.
I grew up with it with the Kwakwakiwak First Nations that I grew up in. My father is full blood from northern Vancouver Island, and during the potlatch ceremonies we'd go attend when I was a kid, and right up until modern times I still go to them. But you'd see this Junacha be danced, fur costume, mask made of cedar with sleepy eyes, puckered up lips, and it would come out onto the dance floor and it would just posture that it was tired, rubbing its eyes, yawning, and it would represent throwing children into a basket or a sack over its shoulder. during the dance. And other families, because every family is different, some families would actually have a basket on the back of the Junachua, and as the dancer went on the floor, the basket was empty, and it would, later on in the dance, it would kind of look alarmed and it'd start making noise, and all of a sudden this be a child in a costume with fur and a cedar mask with long hair would come running out, jump into the basket, and the dancers would leave the floor. And that was just different families' interpretation of the Junachua, the female component of it, that we would see, that was supposedly seen out in the woods around the area where I grew up, northern Vancouver Island. We actually lived in a small island called Alert Bay, and we'd go out into the Broughton Archipelago, clam digging, fishing, berry picking fruit from the abandoned native villages in August, like plums, and if you went there early enough in the spring, you'd get cherries, and apples, of course, in September. And you'd always be taught, to be wary of the Junachua. She's watching you. And if you kids misbehave and don't listen to the elders and act up, the Junachua can come out at nighttime and swim to the boat where you're anchored out and reach your hairy arm in and grab you and shove you into her basket or sack and carry you deep into the forest where she lives in her invisible home, and that's where she'd boil you up and eat you. So it was, I guess you'd say, our boogeyman. And I was, all my life, that's what I heard. And then walking through the village of Alert Bay, you'd pass along the road on the waterfront, and right beside the hospital is a big graveyard that's still there, and all these beautiful memorial poles. Some people would call them totem poles. We call them memorial poles when they're in a graveyard. But they're all carved and standing and aged and weathered. Nowadays, some of them, one of them's fallen down, and the rest of them are all faded. But there's, like everything in life, it's always ongoing, so there's more poles being created and put up. But you'd see these Junachua creatures carved on the poles with puckered up lips and sleepy eyes, pendulous breasts, outstretched arms on some of them. And I remember as a child speeding up my step when I used to go by the graveyard, because, you'd think of the stories and that. And then later on, when I became out of school, I was commercial fishing, and then I went on my own and started a tourism career in the Broughton Archipelago in my abandoned native village. I watched logging camps in the wintertime when everyone went home for Christmas holidays. I'd be out in the head of some inlet or some isolated bay and looking after the generators and making sure the camp wasn't broken into or anything, but I was alone, and I'd jump and pick up trucks or boats and go hunting and exploring, clam digging. And then, of course, when you got older and you needed some extra money in the wintertime, you went clam digging. And that's back-breaking work because the tides, big low tides happen during the wintertime at night, usually. And you're out there with lantern and flashlight and a pitchfork and sacks, big, huge potato sacks. And you're putting over 100 pounds of clams into these sacks, load them up onto your skiff, and then you run out to the main boat and store them. And every tide, you're hitting that low beach. And, of course, you're sitting around the galley table and smoking cigarettes, playing cards, drinking pop, and the stories about the Junachua, the Sasquatch, Bigfoot would come out. It keeps you on your guard, I guess, when you're clam digging, but you heard them. And then later on in life, I had an incident in the early 1990s in a small bay in what we call the Broughton Archipelago. It's a cluster of probably close to 1,000 islands and islets at the mouth of Knights Inlet, Tinkham Inlet, and Wakeman Sound area between Vancouver Island and the mainland. And shellfish beaches abound in there, and old abandoned native villages, some of them thousands of years old. And then when I was out there doing my tourism watchman's program, we heard the stories, and one time we had something happen where one of the workers heard something run from behind where our trailer was, where we used to live, out in this isolated bay. That the only way to get into was by a boat or a float plane. And a couple years later, we went into the same bay and anchored out, and we heard something on the beach. And after a few minutes, we could smell it, and it was really stink, like a human that you pass on the street pushing a shopping cart who hasn't bathed for who knows how long. It was like that kind of rotten human smell, but about 10 or 20 times worse. We put the spotlight on the beach where we heard these noises and saw some shadows moving about. And there were two of them, a big male and what we figure is a female. And both of them, one dropped to its knees, the female, and went into a fetal position, and the male dropped to his knee and held his arm up in front of his face. And we witnessed those two creatures on the beach for a good 20 minutes or more, and that's when my interest for the creatures really sparked, and that's when I went and found someone by the name of Dr. John Bindernagel and shared him my report, and we eventually would go out there and investigate this area, and we went out again, and we did a segment for a documentary out there with him. And ever since then, though, I've been very interested in the creatures.
Todd, we bring you back in here because I want to get your opinion. Since you were with us for the first hour, we only have you for about 40 more minutes. Let's get into what Bigfoot is, because there are a lot of people out there who believe that it is a supernatural creature, believe that it's related to Gigantopithecus, a North American great ape, an alien. Define what you believe this creature is.
Well, I will say this. When it comes to some of these more, I say, outlandish, alien type observations or descriptions, I try to divorce myself from that. I will say this, and I think it's important to note that we have talked about through the Conservancy about what our short-term and long-term goals are. And it just so happened that Tom happened to be not too far from where we were at. He was coming down to talk to the Laluska Foundation. And he asked me, how far is that from where you're at? And it was not too far. So Tom and his wife, Peggy, came to stay up at what we call the Chateau de Squatch, the House of the Squatch, if you will, and spent the weekend. And when I started talking about our midterm plans, now I am planning to retire from the National Guard in about 2 years, and I said the summer of 2019 our plan is to take our boat. We happen to have, my wife and I own a 42-foot motor yacht, that we plan to take it up into Canada and investigate these inlets and some of these islands and islets that Tom's talking about. And Tom said, and now keep in mind this is like early September, just this last year, 6 months ago. And Tom said, what are you waiting for? And I said, well, I don't have the time to do this because I had intended to stay up there for an entire summer. He said, what are you waiting for? This is the time. And I said, what are you talking about? He says, well, this is when my people know that they can go to these beaches and collect these clams and cockles and mussels and eels without any fear of dioxin, red tide they call it. And he said it's the latter part of September, early October. And he said, the Sasquatch come down there as well. The people, my people know this. The bears know this. He said there is more protein per square meter on these beaches than anywhere else in the world. And these creatures obviously need protein. And he would go on to prove that later on. But he kind of put me on the spot. He said, hey, let's do this now. And I said, well, I don't know how we can pull this off. He said, well, 3 weeks. That's what we got. I got connections with people with boats. I know the area well. And if you can put a team together, let's make this happen. And that's really the genesis of what became Operation Sea Monkey. Just a name that we kind of euphemistically chose for this particular expedition. And within 3 weeks, we were able to raise over $5,000 in donations, which paid for, I would say, 80% of the expedition, and the Conservancy chipped in the rest. Tom set us up with an amazing captain and a great boat. We had a 50-foot trawler, and we went out to this area that he's talking about. And even before we left the dock, we rolled out a chart of the area, and Tom took a red marker and he started putting all these dots on the map. And these dots each, and I think there were 20, I can't remember, 21 to 25 dots he put on the map on all these islands. He said, these are encounters that I know about. Just him. And he not only knew about them, he knew the people and the circumstances behind every one of those dots. And so that really excited me. The team we put together was really a dream team of researchers. Other than Tom and myself, we had Ron Moorhead, who's a published author, and the author of if your listeners are aware of the Sierra sounds that were taped back in the 1970s of Bigfoot vocalizations that happened in the high Sierras of Northern California. We had Tom Steenberg, who I know you're familiar with. He came along with us as well. Gunnar Monson, who is part of the Tillamook Forest Research Project and owner of Sasquatch Coffee Company, and also a cameraman, a good friend of mine that I've known for a long time. And we went up into this area, and it was absolutely, basically it was a scouting mission. I will say that, because it came together so quickly. But my intent was to, one, validate this area as a prime area for research, and we easily came away with that. These islands that Tom's talking about are prime areas. I would say they're uninhabited, except they are inhabited by a lot of wild animals. In fact, we had a run-in with a grizzly bear on our last island we got to, and that's a story in and of itself. But we visited Village Island, which is where Tom had been. His tribe, like he says, the Kwakwaka'wakw tribe, settled hundreds, I don't know, thousands perhaps, years ago. And having Tom aboard was amazing because he knew all of the history. And we did find, I'm just going to say, we found some anecdotal evidence. We found some potential tracks. We had some amazing, I'll just say some very interesting things happen while we were there. Again, we have a documentary that's in post-production right now, and should be ready by this summer. And in fact, at the conference we were just at, we played a kind of a teaser sizzle reel, if you will, from the documentary. And I definitely can say it was time not wasted. Tom proved what he said about the amount of seafood there. We almost at every island we went to, we dropped crab pots, and then on a few occasions we dropped prawn traps, and we ate seafood, wild seafood, like I have never before. I mean, imagining so many prawns that you can't eat anymore, and crab on top of that, and clams, But I will mention this one time, Tom took off for about 30 minutes. He took off in one of the two Zodiacs we had that we would launch from the mothership, the Clattawa. And he came back like 30 minutes later and just had, like he said, 100 clams. I said, "Where'd you get that?" He goes, "Right over there." And he literally said he only dug a 1 meter hole in the sand and got over 100 clams. So, he kind of made his point. It makes sense. These creatures, just like the bear, just like the natives, know these things are there, and they're going to take advantage of it. But it was a great adventure and money well spent.
Let's get to some questions from our audience, if you don't mind. This one's coming from Joyce in the SOR Space Travelers Club. She is asking, do either of you believe Bigfoot vocalization sounds like a banshee? And to your knowledge, has anyone ever analyzed the frequency of these recordings?
Well, I will jump in. I will say this: one of the speakers at the conference this weekend is Dave Ellis, and he is probably, if you ask me, the foremost expert in vocalization analysis. He uses a spectral analysis program, and he has been able to isolate certain sounds that fall within the range that we believe these things have. And by doing so, they've been able to, if you will, fast forward through hours and hours and hours of recordings, and within less than 30 minutes or so, by dialing in the specific frequencies that we're looking for and isolate these sounds that fall within range of these things. As for myself, I will say this. Back in 1998, I put together an expedition. We dubbed the operation Entice Contact 2. We'll follow on to, obviously, Operation Entice Contact. And with me was Ron Moorhead and Peter Byrne, who is a very famous pioneer researcher. On this particular day, Ron had flown his own airplane in, and we had hoped to use it for aerial observation, but the weather was really socked in, and he was unable to really fly this. And there became a time where there was an opportunity for him to fly out weather-wise, and he decided to take that. So Peter and Ron had taken off, Peter driving Ron back to his plane. I myself was alone setting up some seismic ground sensors that I had borrowed from the National NASI, the North American Science Institute. And we had some nasty weather come in the form of a hailstorm, and I had the option to either try to get back to our base camp or take refuge up into some old-growth forest, and I chose the latter. So I kind of stopped what I was doing and trying to calibrate these ground sensors. And I figured this hailstorm would pass pretty quickly, so I went up under these old-growth trees. And in the process, once I got there, I had to answer the call of nature. And so I did, as I was standing between a couple of large old-growth fir trees. And just as I was buttoning up my trousers and buckling my belt, I got hit full force with a roar I mean, you talk about vocalizations. I got roared at. I'd say by something, but I know what it was, because it defied description of anything that is known. And I'll tell you what, Dave, I have done a lot of crazy, stupid things. I've jumped out of perfectly good working airplanes. I've climbed mountains. I've swam with sharks. I've been shot at by mortars and rockets in Iraq. I have never, to this day, been more scared than I was when that creature let off this roar. And that's actually my only experience with vocalizations from these things. But I can tell you, the volume, the pitch, everything about this thing excluded anything bear, cougar, elk, whatever.
Yes.
In that area. It literally, I was frozen. I've heard the term paralyzed with fear. I thought it was just a euphemism. Well, I learned that day it was a reality, because for 2 minutes, I literally, as much as I wanted to, I could not move. And after 2 minutes, I pretty much backed out of that area and hoped that whatever made that sound wasn't going to take me, because it was extremely powerful and extremely frightening.
Did you happen to notice at all that the howl, whether or not it echoed? Because when I heard the roar that I did, the one thing that we noticed in the mountains is there was no echo that was going around the mountains.
That's one of the things I've noticed out in Broughton Archipelago. When end of September rolls around, you start getting the vocalizations, which I believe is from them coming off the high grounds, coming back to the area where the abandoned orchards from the homesteaders and abandoned orchards from the native villages are. So the bears are going to hammer them all through the summer until mid-September, when they can't get out to the very end of the branches. It's too dangerous, too high, and so forth, but there's still good clusters of fruit. That's when I noticed you'd start hearing vocalization mid to end of September, beginning of October, and you'd hear deep, deep roars and like whoops, and you wouldn't hear an echo. And even about an archipelago, I was shooting rifles all the time or just yelling for a crewman or something. You get the echoes in the bays and off the islands across from that. But I noticed with those roars, you never would hear an echo, not where we were anyway in the trailer. And, it was a 26-foot trailer with a 10-foot by 10-foot cedar addition on it. It's cruise quarters for a bunch of mid to late 20-year-olds to do clearing of brush in this abandoned native village to tourists that were coming in on yachts and their dinghies, and the sea kayaking enthusiasts, as well as the numerous sea kayaking companies that would come to our abandoned village to see the totem poles on the ground, the big house remains, and all this history they'd read about in books and so forth, and they'd want to walk through it. It's kind of like going to, I guess, Egypt and going to the pyramids. If you go to Egypt, you got to go there. Yeah. You go to northern Vancouver Island, you got to go to Village Island, Mamalalakula, Village of the Last Potlatch. So the vocalizations, it got to a point where I remember one night, I was telling my crew, yeah, guys, hurry up and shut your candles off and flashlights, go to sleep. And what I wanted my crew in sleeping by the time it got dark, because I knew damn well if we started hearing those howls that weren't wolves, I'd hear 10,000 questions from my younger crew that was out there. What's that? What's going on? And personally, I didn't want to hear them either, because behind the trailer there was some plum trees that had grown pretty big in a big, huge cluster. And, you'd hear the deer and the bears in there, But I remember the odd night you'd hear something in there, and you knew darn well it wasn't a deer and it wasn't a bear, and I sure as hell wasn't going out to check on it with a flashlight. And, you know, if I remember a few times going to that trailer when I was alone, hunting or going out halibut fishing or crab fishing, and I'd stay there and put my boat on the beach. And I remember as it was getting dark, I'd be pretty much plugging my ears going, la, 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 go to sleep, Tom, because you didn't want to hear those damn things. Because, like Todd said, you know, it's one thing to talk the talk, but when it comes to walking the walk, and you go out into the Broughton Archipelago by yourself, even if you have a shotgun and a .338 or 30-30 like I pack, I usually pack my .338 nowadays because I know how damn big they are. And, you know, you're walking the walk. You're out there alone, and, you know, if everything crap goes sideways and hits the fan, it's you, and you're going to deal with it. And one of the best ways is if you're not going to be clam digging at night, well, then you best be sleeping, because there's no sense listening to them, because all they're going to do is make you a little bit, I guess, plain and simple, get you scared. And there's nothing worse than being scared out in the bush of the water by yourself, because that's when stupid things happen.
Well, I will tell you this, too. You know, Tom took us to Village Island, and this was the island that his Kwakwaka'wakw tribe had lived on. Like he says, it was the area of the last potlatch. We talked potlatch, by the way. He's talking about a governable, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a group of tribes that would get together for governance and make up of the rules and talk about how the tribes will live. And anyway, when we got there, it was amazing. He talks about a totem. There were a number of totems on that island when we got there, and he showed us, we found only one remaining totem that had fallen over, and he was able to teach us the origin of the family or the person that totem went with. But you know, it's kind of sad, you know, that these islands are abandoned, but I'll tell you what, they're not abandoned. We ran into bear scat about every 10, 15 feet, and one of the reasons that drew us to this island was the fact that these communities that used to live there have these orchards, and like he says, they're plums, they're pears, they're apples, they're cherries, you know, and yeah, they're overgrown. They're totally overgrown, but trust me, the bear, they know they're there. They swim across these channels just to get there, and trust me, too, that Bigfoot knows they're there. And we were able to see some signs where, you know, where the bears went, there were tunnels through the salmonberry brambles. You know, you could see the tunnels where the bears would go through. But there were certain areas where it looked like you took a bulldozer and just plowed through there. And he goes, that's where the Bequas and the Sasquatch came through, because they don't bother digging tunnels. They just go right over the top of it. But it was an amazing adventure. We had a great time. We had some crazy things happen, and when the documentary comes out, I'm sure your listeners are going to appreciate it.
Couple more questions. This one coming from Mike. He actually does the research for my SOR Sightlines report here. Either of you, and Tom, we'll start with you on this one. Do you believe that Sasquatch is migratory?
Absolutely. I've been studying because I was out in the bush for almost 30 years living out there. And I mean bush. Like, you know, I got sick and tired of the concrete road in 1990, I think it was, and just up and went in with my guns and my cigarettes and my fishing gear and my clothes and rain gear. And, you know, I didn't come back out until probably 1999. You know, I'd come out for commercial fishing and things, but everything I did was out in that bush. And what I found was, if we just run through the year, this time of the year right now, end of January is shellfish time. There's no rivers with fish hardly. You know, the salmon runs are over. The steelhead are coming in, but the December rains were so heavy and the fresh snows that the rivers are in freshet conditions. They're deep and running fast. So steelhead's not an option until this time of the year, into the beginning of September through into the beginning of March, in between the rainstorms. You have a high concentration of protein, which is your steelhead trout that comes into the rivers to spawn, and some of them are up to 20 pounds plus. And they hold in pools. I seen a pool couple weeks back. There's a dozen steelhead holes. All you have to do, where I was standing on that logging truck bridge, was grab a couple big boulders and two guys heave them down into that pool, and you're going to either kill or stun one or two of them and catch them down at the riffles lower down, and you got some food. And then, so now we're into the steelhead time. Come February in Vancouver Island, throughout the rest of the Pacific Northwest, from Washington State to central southeast Alaska, we have the herring going to start hitting the beaches here. We'll get thousands of tons of herring coming into bays and shallows and rock piles, and some of them will come right into where there's only 3 inches of water, and it's just a frenzy of spawning activity, and the water goes greenish blue like someone pouring milk in salt water. Yeah. And anyone can go down there and just with your hand, you can just pick up these herring that are spawning and throw them into a bucket. And before you know it, within 15, 20 minutes, you have 5 gallons of herring. That's a lot of protein. And then with the spawning activity on low tide and even high tide after the waves come in and wind, you get all this seaweed and eelgrass and sticks and branches and anything that the herring can affix those sticky eggs to, and clumps, some of them 1.5 inches thick, will wash up onto the beach. So there's a bunch more protein. So you're into March is your herring time. Towards the end of March into April, a small fish that's pretty much comparable to a smelt will hit glacier-fed rivers in the inlets all through the mainland, from basically the Fraser River. I can't speak for Washington State because I don't know at this time, but from the Fraser River right by the border right up to southeast Alaska, these glacier-fed rivers, sometimes you can, almost looks like you can walk on the black backs of millions of hooligans. About the biggest one, I guess, will be about 10 or 11 inches long, high in oil content, high in protein. Same thing like herring, you just pick them up, and there's your food. And then April comes around, or end of April comes around, and now you start getting some bears waking up. And the deer, of course, are starting to hit the beaches and the estuaries because all the grasses are starting to come up. So it's fresh green shoots and grasses and leaves, and those deer are hitting those. June comes along, end of May comes along, and we have what we call the salmonberry sprout. It's the fresh shoots of the salmonberry, which are at the base when they're soft and not woody. In a good area, they can be about 1 inch thick, and they're the color of celery, and they're really crunchy and tasty. You just peel the thorn skin off. And then, of course, beginning of June, the salmonberries come out, and that's the favorite food of the bears. And then huckleberries come out. You have all the summer growth coming now, and ended mid-June through till mid-August, and then the salmon start hitting the rivers. But during the time period of May, June, July, and August into the first part of September, there's a lot of daylight, a lot of heat. It means a lot of growth of the photoplankton and the single-cell planktons in the water, and that's what the bivalves, the shellfish, the mussels, barnacles, cockles, which is a favorite food of the buckless, and all different types of clams, like your butter clam, little neck, razor clam, in some open exposed places throughout the coast. So it's nothing but food that can sustain grizzly bears that need, up to 6,500 calories or more per day. Well, if you compare that to the Sasquatch, they're probably going to need 65 to 10,000 calories per day. Well, the coast of North America, Pacific Northwest, from Washington State up to southeast Alaska, offers you the highest concentration of protein on Earth per cubic meter or yard on a high flow area at low tide. So when you go to those beaches and you look on the surface, you got eelgrass, little snails. You roll over a rock. Well, the rock, number one, is going to be encrusted in barnacles, which grizzly bears and black bears will chew off. Some rocks will be encrusted with mussels, which black bears and grizzly bears chew off. But you roll that rock over, and there's baby shore crabs in the hundreds under some of these boulders, that weigh up to 100 pounds taking shelter while the tide is out. And then you have these little bugs that look like cockroaches that live in the intertidal zone and in the salt water. You have eels. You have baby fish called bullheads. They're, can't remember what they're called, cabezon or something. But anyway, they're called a bullhead on the coast. And then when you start digging into that sand, you got ghost shrimp. You have big, long worms. Some of them are yard long. I can't remember what they're called. They're not Doritos, but they bite like a son of a gun. And boy, they sure hurt when you're clam digging and you pick up one of those and they bite you. And then, of course, all the shellfish into the sediments. But the beaches of the Pacific Northwest are unique in North America, for when the tide goes out in many areas, they just recently, they say, identified them. They didn't recently identify them, those ologists and doctors. They've been there for thousands of years. Our people built them. In my language of Kwakwala from northern Vancouver Island, we call them lohiwe. They mean clam gardens. So if you go to YouTube and type in clam gardens, Native Watchman, you'll see a nice video clip I did a few years ago in West Coast Native attire that I wear, a tunic and everything. And I talk about the lohiwe, the clam gardens, the archaeological importance, but mostly how abundant they are for shellfish, because our people would pile rocks from the intertidal zone into like hedgerows down at the low water mark, like walls along the side. And you got to look at it like when you had a big cedar canoe. You know, it's like having a Rolls Royce. You don't take a Rolls Royce on a potholed logging road with branches hanging out to the midline. You're going to scratch it to heck and break the suspension and damage it. So the canoes were the same way. You didn't want them banging on rocks, and the tide went up and down with waves and wind. So they used to clear the front of where their big houses were, the way they lived, which became a lohiwe, a clam garden, no rocks. Good for nutrients for the clams that are in that sediments, but also for your canoe, so it wouldn't be damaged by hitting rocks or boulders. It was a nice gravelly, pebbly, or sand beach. So the area that I come from, as far as, you know, if you want to be a Sasquatchologist and you want to find them, you know, I've been out there and I know just how abundant your food sources are on a seasonal basis per month, because I'm an Indian and that's what we do. We still harvest to this day the traditional ways. Like, I'll be going to Vancouver Island here on Thursday, and Saturday I'm out in the bush checking some trail cameras, but at the same time I'm going out to the bush to do something. I'll be harvesting while I'm out there. Who knows what I see, you know. Being a native Indian, I'm allowed to hunt year-round. So the Sasquatch is in the same way. They're taking advantage of what the coastal region has to offer.
Do you believe then that in order for them to survive, that they have to keep moving, that they have to keep at pace with Mother Nature? For instance, bears. We rarely ever hear of occasions where people have seen Sasquatch and bears in the same territory, maybe getting into a wildlife type fight. And just a reminder, we got about 5 minutes left before we got to go to break here.
And since I got to bail off here pretty quick, let me just say this. I do believe that the bear compete directly with the Sasquatch. And like Tom says, these areas, and this is actually, after this adventure expedition that we did, has really riveted me and the Conservancy as a whole to want to explore this area. But the bottom line is this: yeah, though they definitely compete for the same food sources, but like Tom says, these food sources are very plentiful, and they are a place that, you know, I think when it comes down to it, Bigfoot's going to win. I heard from one source up there, native source, where there were 30 people on a beach. And Tom would correct me if I maybe heard that from you. I want to say it was Joe Wilson. Was it Joe Wilson?
Yeah. Joe Wilson, yeah.
Joe had mentioned, another native gentleman had mentioned that there were 30 people on a clam digging expedition, if you will, that, and this is, I think, maybe only two years ago, where they were on a beach and they were digging both for personal use as well as commercial sale clams, because, the time was right. And lo and behold, there were 3 Sasquatch that came out on the beach and seemed to pay no attention to them initially. Basically just said, we see what you're doing, and that's what we're here for. And I said, so what did they do? And he said, these 30 people, 30 eyewitnesses, is appropriate. They left the beach. 30 people saw 3 Sasquatch. Have you ever heard of it? No. But this is what happened. 30 people got back in their boats, and they left the beach and gave it over to the Sasquatch. This comes from a good friend of mine, Joe Wilson. And anyway, again, I'm going to have to bail here pretty soon, but I'm leaving you in good hands because my dear friend, Tom Sewid, has got so much to offer, and I'm so grateful to have him on board as an advisor to the American Primate Conservancy, as well as just a good friend. And anyway, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, have a good night, Todd. Thanks a lot.
Not a problem. We got about 2 minutes before we are going to go to break here on Spaced Out Radio, and I do want to say that Tom Sewid is going to be with us for the next hour, and he's also going to be joining us in March on the 7th to talk more Bigfoot around North America. So we appreciate you taking the time to do that, Tom.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Absolutely. And we have a lot of questions coming up for you from not only myself, our audience, as we are very, very audience interactive on this show. Todd Neiss has been with us for the first 2 hours. In hour number 2 and coming up in hour number 3, we have Tom Sewid. It's going to be an interesting night of straight Bigfoot talk coming up right after this. You are listening to Space Out Radio. I'm your host, Dave Scott. And make sure when you're typing in your questions, everyone, just do me a favor, type them in capital letters. And just so you know, Skeptic Tank on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio. We do not take phone calls on this show. Yes, we have that call-in number, but it's a secret. It's a secret, my friend. We just don't do it. Too many trolls. Too many trolls out there. We'll be right back right after this.
The SOR Sightlines is a place for you to find answers to your strange experiences. Hi there, this is Mike Schmidt. If you have had an encounter with ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, ETs, or anything else that doesn't make sense, head to spacedoutradio.com and file a Sightlines report. All information you give is 100% confidential, and I will personally help you find the answers you need. SOR Sightlines, your answers are a click away.
Have you got your Cosmic Passport? If you need one, tune in to Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Weekend. This is Elizabeth Anglin, ET experiencer, spirit medium, and host of Cosmic Passport. Each weekend I'll be bringing you interviews and support from other paranormal experiencers, and the best in intuitive spiritual guidance from across the globe. It's all happening starting at 9 p.m. Pacific Time, midnight Eastern, on spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4COP. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit, and expect a miracle.
This is your medium, Joanna, from Spaced Out Weekend, 2 mediums and a large. I would love it if you would come and join us with host James Tyson every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. Together, we will take your calls and your questions live. Our goal is to provide you with a positive outlook on deep questions that you may have. Questions regarding love, relationships, money, or whatever else is on your mind. Come and check us out at spacedoutradio.com.
Have you checked out the SOR Spacewire at spacedoutradio.com yet? Every day we post the latest stories regarding the weird, strange, and completely unbelievable. From cryptid and UFO sightings to the conspiracy world, we tackle it all. Hi there, I'm Eric Markham, Spaced Out Radio's news director for the SOR Spacewire. And if you have a story, I want to hear it. Email me at news@spacedoutradio.com.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
A child grew up too fast, went running wild. Now we don't know who to pray to anymore.
Good evening and welcome back to Space Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us on this Wednesday night. Always a pleasure. Well, early Wednesday morning if you're on the East Coast, or now over on Central Time and Mountain Time. Right here on the Pacific Coast, Alaska, Hawaii, we're still on yesterday for you. Tomorrow night on the show, Brett Butler from Grace Under Fire is going to join us. We're going to talk about comedy and what it's like to be psychic in Hollywood. It's going to be an interesting topic indeed. I hope that you take the time to join us right here at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. Want to welcome in everyone listening in on Revolution Radio. Yes, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. We are also live in Sin City, Renegade Talk Radio. We are the nighttime show of Las Vegas. And, of course, if you're listening in on the United Public Radio Network live on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world, good to have you along with us as well. Thank you for taking part in all of the chat rooms, including on Twitter at hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Nobody knows how to use it in a sentence. Let me try this again. Otorhinolaryngologist. I don't even know. I'm not even giving it another shot. I'm pissed off with this one, Bill. Pissed off with this password. It's just a tongue twister. I'm not saying it again. But Bill Cardwell does set the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at hashtag SpaceOutRadio and at SpacedOutRadio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download this show and others on iTunes. And, of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of information there for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club like Jefferson Rose did today. It's only $5 a month. Tonight we're talking Bigfoot. Tom Sewid is with us for the next hour. He was with us in hour number 2 with Todd Neiss, who joined us from the beginning of the show, but Todd had to book out of here, so we got Tom now to talk Bigfoot. Tom, welcome back.
Yeah, welcome back.
I want to get into something that I find very important here. Very rarely do we have First Nations people who are actually willing to talk publicly about Sasquatch, albeit the legends, albeit the way that they have been treated by the white man for generations. There are so many different variables. Probably the biggest one, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, is because for so many years the white man really never believed any of the legends and the stories and the folklore that came along with the First Nations culture. Why have you been someone who has been outspoken publicly about Sasquatch?
Because in November, a friend of mine had a Facebook group called Sasquatch Island, referring to Vancouver Island. And I'd been on it a couple times, and I actually hadn't been there for a few months, so I went and checked it in mid-November, and lo and behold, he hadn't been working it, and it had 42 members, and most of the posts were mine anyway, and it had a little blue tab up top that said this group needs an administrator, and I guess you could say I foolishly clicked it, and I entered a post, and then I got a little interest, so I kept this daily post thing, but I was using the First Nations Kwakwaka'wakw, Northern Vancouver Island that I am. I was using our culture and stories and our lore about the Junakwa, the wild woman of the woods, and the male counterpart of the Junakwa, and which is Bigfoot Sasquatch. And I noticed that the viewers' numbers started to go up. And then I thought, okay, and no offense to any of the listeners out there, I call it white man's magic. The internet is the most powerful tool that's ever been created to date as far as I'm concerned. And I call Facebook the modern day smoke signal. So I went out and I started copying and pasting with the pictures of mine, because I have a pretty good inventory of pictures that I've accumulated through my years in bush and elsewhere. And I started putting it on other sites that are out there that are Bigfoot, Sasquatch related. And now it's up to, I think I got 17 different groups that I post on daily. And Sasquatch Islands now has, I broke the 1,500 person membership mark the night before last. So it's gone up considerably from 42 back in November. And it's, what I find is, number one, I went to my elders and my family and Elsa and others that are, you know, tied to my family, and I said, look, the people want to hear about our stories. And they just said, just do it. And, you know, just, you know, always, you know, try to refer to, you know, where the information can be found. And we have a native cultural center called Umista, Umista, umista.ca. So it has everything on there that I post about and talk about, and it gives me a lot of guidance on the creatures and other things about our culture. And I know, like even tonight, I got a private message from one of my advisors from my hometown, Alert Bay. You know, he's younger than me, but he's, you know, he lives in Alert Bay and has for 50 years. So he kind of, you know, verbally spanked me tonight, and I had to go and add some additions to one of the posts just to clarify something concerning Spookles, which is a spiritual animal that is bipedal apparently and skeletal looking and covered in hair, and it's supposed to be, it's the guardian of the ghost realm. And to me, it's, you know, it's small, covered in hair. It comes out onto the beach at low tide for cockles, a type of shellfish. And a lot of people are mistaking it for our Sasquatch, and it's not. It's from a different realm altogether. It's not from the natural realm. It's from the spiritual realm, the ghost world. And posting it up, and I know there's a lot of Kwakwaka'wakw out there that, you know, because when I used to be in tourism, I used to be in that abandoned native village and sharing my culture and heritage. And I always say 50% of my people like me. The other 50% hate me, despise me, loathe me. And the reason for that, it's not because I'm sharing our culture and heritage. It's because they live a very depressed life, isolated without their high-level education. They don't have a good career. They have nothing going for them. So we call it the crab syndrome, where all they want to do is drag down everyone else to be in the pits and the bowels of where they are in society. And I won't fall for it. I'm too strong for that. I'm a bushman. I was a hunting guide for many years, and I specialized in grizzly bears and black bears. And, you know, I'm a bushman, a modern-day bushman, commercial fisherman, you know, lived in the bush for decades, hunting guide. You know, when I say something, I mean what I say, and I say what I mean, and it's meat and potatoes and straight up. And if you don't like it, I really don't care. That's my attitude. But when it comes to our culture and heritage, I've been called Tommy the Tour Whore, the culture vulture. Well, these are from the 50%, actually, which is probably far less in our society of Kwakwaka'wakw. They despise me and loathe me. And what it's all about is because every time they turn on the television nowadays, every time they go to Facebook, every time they go in the past when I was in tourism and they see a tourism publication on our region, or they open up a newspaper or a magazine, there's Tommy. Well, I took creative writing and journalism, and after, you know, for a fair amount of time back in my schooling days, and I write and I get the story out there. And with the Sasquatch Bigfoot, I firmly believe that we need conclusive proof. And one of the main things I do, and remember what I said about meat and potatoes straight up, I do not believe, support, or condone the woo-woo. To me, it's an animal that breathes, it will bleed like us, and it has everything we have except for ego. And that's why we can't find it, because it doesn't have ego, which is my opinion. And if you have ego in the bush, it's going to make you seen, it's going to make you make mistakes, it's going to make you not accomplish what you're trying to get. Whereas the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, I think, doesn't have that human trait of ego. And they have everything about what we humans were for tens of thousands of years until the modern era when we supposedly became civilized, where I think we're in the most uncivilized state humans have ever been in the modern day. Whereas back in the old days of tribal, when everything was about the chief and the leadership and the hierarchy and the tier structure that held and bound that tribe together and made it strong, we've lost that. Yet the Sasquatch Bigfoot still has it. They have their scouts that are out there banging on trees, warning you, stop, turn around, go back where you come from, human. I don't want you up here. My family, my clan's up here. And we as Kwakwaka'wakw are taught to heed that warning. And a lot of people ask me, well, you don't believe in tree banging? God, no. Why would I want to go find a Sasquatch, bang on a tree to announce to the Sasquatch, stop where you are, turn around and go away, Sasquatch. I don't want you near me where I'm banging tree because I'm telling you my family, my clan's here. So I look at it in a whole different mindset. I look at it in the bushman tribal aspect when I go out looking for Sasquatch and when I'm contemplating, trying to strategize how I'm going to find these things, because I need to find them. Number one, I need to shut those naysayers up that doubted me, that figured I was smoking something or drinking something or was a couple rocks short of a full load while I talk about seeing these creatures. I know they're out there. I've seen them 3 times. I've had 3 incidents with them. I've had other incidents where I've smelled something or heard something or had that gut feeling like I did not feel right. Something wasn't right where I was in that bush environment. So with the Sasquatches and my people, you know, there's a lot of them that take that Hollywood hokey-pokey, holistic mumbo-jumbo attitude of, oh, it's a sacred spiritual thing and we don't do it. Oh, come on now. There's enough stuff published in the books about Kwakwaka'wakw culture and heritage attributed to the Chonakwa and to the Bukwas. And there's countless amounts of Kwakwaka'wakw and non-Kwakwaka'wakw and half-breed Kwakwaka'wakw that are carving pieces of wood, painting canvas, carving silver and gold, and putting the images of Chonakwa, Bukwas, and other spiritual creatures that belong to our culture. So when people finger me out and call me a culture vulture or a tour whore, I say to hell with them. They're hypocrites because their own family members are making money off our culture and heritage. It's not a word in Webster's dictionary, but when the first sailing ship came to coastal British Columbia and dropped a rusty anchor, I know there was a canoe load of Indians out there going, hey, you want to buy this carving? Hey, you want to trade for this? Because I like that musket. I like that pots and pans you got. I like that metal knife. We have always commodified, and that's the word that's not in Webster's dictionary. I heard it from one of our native speakers about 25 years ago. He said, how can we commodify our culture and heritage? Because we have done it since the dawn of our creation. We have always attributed the accumulation of wealth through our culture and heritage. That's what our potlatch system is all about. So yeah, there's a lot of naysayers out there about what I'm doing. They don't have the cojones to get on the internet and go private message me on Facebook and say, hey, Tommy, I don't like what you're saying. Here's my phone number. Call me. Because they know I'm a bushman, commercial fisherman, hunting guide, and they know I'm going to rip them a new one verbally because of their drivel that they're trying to spew. So when it comes to the culture and heritage of the First Nations across Canada and the North American Native Indians, every nation is unique. They have their own laws. My nation has chosen to make money off their culture and has since the first rusty anchor dropped in some unknown bay in our traditional territories from a sailing ship. It's just the way, and it's always going to be our way. As for the other tribes, I can't speak for them. I do respect them totally, and respect is everything, because a lot of people ask me, Tom, do you hunt the Sasquatch? Well, yeah, I hunt them. I hunt them with a camera. I hunt them with trail cameras. I hunt them with my own eyes to see them, to smell them, to hear them. And the carpe diem, seize the day, get out of the concrete world and go out into the world of the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and try to find them. It's the greatest game of hide-and-go-seek going. Why would you not want to participate in it? But when I do go out there, I'm a bushman. I ain't stupid. I bring a gun. You know, you pack a gun 10,000 times in the bush, you may never need it. But that one time you need it, you're going to be thankful that you brought it. So as far as I'm concerned, when I go into the concrete environment, I carry a pocket knife. Some little gangbanger wants to try jack this Indian, he's going to have a world of hurt on his hand. I tell you, me and that jackknife are going to do what we have to do to protect me. Now, when it comes to the bush world, where I got my jackknife, I got my big knife, I got my skinning knife, I got my pawing knife, and I got my gun, usually a 12 gauge with Barnes X sabots in it because I got a rifled barrel, and, you know, SSG triple odd, which is for the close-up, vaporize any skull of a grizzly bear, black bear, or anything. But when it comes to Sasquatch, Bigfoot, do I go out there and hunt them with a gun? No. Because we Kwakwaka'wakw are taught you always respect those creatures. When you hear them vocalizing, banging wood against tree, shaking tree, throwing things at you, they're telling you, leave. You respect them. Turn around, leave. Let them have that shellfish beach, like Todd was mentioning, that my cousin Joe Wilson mentioned about those people leaving that beach. Because that's our way, respect them. And, you know, there's enough clam beaches out there. But we Indians in Canada, we have, under the Canadian law, the right of food, social, ceremonial harvest, 365 days a year legally, night and day, outside of federal parks and outside of private property without permission. That basically means 95% of Canada is open for us to harvest for food, social, ceremonial rights. And I don't care if it's a black bear, a wolf, a cougar, a grizzly bear, a Sasquatch, Bigfoot. You want to disrespect me and try to charge me, you get within 30 feet of me, you become food, social, ceremonial, real bloody quick, and I'm going to be squeezing trigger and pumping that shotgun and putting a lot of Barnes F copper into you and dropping you, just like I've done to many, many bears. So there you go. There's the views on how I look at these creatures and the culture, like you asked me.
Question coming from Joe in the SOR Space Travelers Club for you. What do you think about this phenomena of upside-down trees on Vancouver Island? There's also some in Newfoundland. A lot of people believe that this is what Bigfoot does to mark its territory.
On Vancouver Island, it's mostly, from what I've seen, it's mostly a bunch of bored loggers and Kubota and Caterpillar backhoes grabbing the trees and shoving them into the holes they dug. That's what I've seen so far. I've never personally come across what I've seen in some of the pictures and what I've read about, but respecting my fellow researchers and enthusiasts for Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and some who might have just ran into it out there while they're in the territories of the creatures, hey, maybe it happens. But, you know, it's something that you really got to look at with an open mind. You always got to put the human factor into anything you see.
Let's get to some more questions here from our audience. This one comes from Eric, and he is asking, or pardon me, this one comes from Darren. Has there ever been a person that saw a Bigfoot and wasted literally their entire life savings trying to prove it that you know of?
Without a respect for him, I'm not going to say his name. It's when you see them, and I can speak from my own experience, a spark gets doused with a fuel injector of gasoline vapor, and an inferno begins called passion to try to find out the answers to your questions about these creatures. And then, of course, you get ego kicks in. I'm not going to deny that. You know, it'd be nothing better than to be on the cover of National Geographic and Canadian Geographic and probably even put you on National Enquirer. I'm the first one to come out with conclusive proof after Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson. So it's, you know, it's a lot goes into it, but the main thing is it will bankrupt you. Like right now, I'm going to Vancouver Island. I don't have a pot to pee in, so to speak, financially right now until the herring season starts. But it's not stopping me from going at the bush, because all I need is my rusty shotgun shells that I know are waiting for me on Vancouver Island, and my shotgun and my bush gear. And hell or high water, I'm going to go in and get her done. And, you know, you can't look at it as like this one gentleman who's in Bellevue, Washington here, and he's an IT person, so he's a concrete jungler and stuck to a computer screen all the time. He has a beautiful Jeep. He has so many GoPros and cameras and trail cameras. It just blew me away when he was telling me everything as we stood by his Jeep at the Kelso Longview Sasquatch Fest there last weekend. And, you know, he's sitting there today on a private message to me, and he goes, "Oh, I just hate IT. I'd like to get out of this jungle of concrete, and I'd like to pursue." Well, you have to carpe beepin' diem, seize the beepin' day. You know, it's one of the greatest Indian quotes I know of, that, you know, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. If you're a Sasquatch enthusiast, that's great. All the power to you. But if you want to cross that threshold and become a researcher, well, then you're going to have to be a researcher. And you don't look at it in the money aspect. You know, you just go out and get her done. You know, chances are you're probably not going to run into it anyway. But if you keep putting money, your chips on that square, you're eventually going to come up spades and get a win. So it's a lot of people out there, it holds them back, that financial thing. And like I say, it's all about passion. You just got to get her done.
Let's get to another question here. This one from Rachel. She's a brand new listener to this show, so we want to welcome Rachel in to Spaced Out Radio. Thank you so much for giving us an opportunity. She is asking, you don't believe, Tom, what a lot of First Nations believe, that it could be a spirit creature like the bear, wolf, and bird?
No, I don't. It's because I've seen it 3 times. I've been around it other times, and I've seen it hard evidence. Spirit creatures don't leave tracks. They don't leave broken branches twisted. They don't leave beds. Spirits don't sleep. You know, it's like a ghost. What are you afraid of ghosts for? You know, they apparently walk through things like a mist. So what are you afraid of it for? You hit it with a stick, you ain't going to hurt it. Your stick's going to go through the ghost. It hits you, its hand or fist is going to go through you because it's mist. It's a ghost. It's a spiritual entity. So when it comes to Sasquatch, throwing rocks and sticks and pushing over dead trees, like it did the first incident I had with it, it pushed a dead tree over that night. Didn't see it, sure heard it come crashing down, a big rotten tree. It goes to what I believe in my opinion, with woo-woo. When you hear of someone who was unfortunately raped or physically abused or even mentally abused so bad, you hear about it, how the mental Band-Aid kicks in, and they forget about it. You don't see someone you know who got raped, tells you every time they see you that they got raped. No, the mental Band-Aid kicks in. The Creator, God, Mother Nature, which is part of that, the law of breathing, heart-beating, blood creatures on this planet. You see an animal being torn apart by a pack of wolves, or on TV you see it happen to an animal in a savanna by a pack of lions or hyenas. You see them screaming and bawling. Yeah, that hurts, yeah. Then all of a sudden you see this calm come across their face of that animal. Mm-hmm. That's Mother Nature. It's the Creator kicking in and putting the mental Band-Aid in place so that animal doesn't suffer no more. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and you hear people talk about, oh, I saw this Bigfoot go across a trail, then it cloaked, and all of a sudden I could see branches and grass moving, and I couldn't see it no more. Or I heard this screaming, yelling noise, and I could smell this stink, and all of a sudden this tree was shaking, and all of a sudden I saw 2 orbs and things like that. To me, the woo-woo factor, because I've been in bush for 30 years or more, I've been out there and been so beep scared that I almost peed my pants. You know, I've been on commercial fish boats where you get in fierce weather and that, and you get scared and your throat gets dry. So I felt real fear out of a concrete, urbanized jungle out in the bush world and water world. And you get calm. So to me, with the woo-woo factor, I always say that majority of them are just people get so beep scared, all of a sudden their mental Band-Aid kicks in, and there's your cloaking, there's your orbs, there's your, it was speaking to me in my mind. Oh, what did it tell you? I usually ask people, tell you not to crap your pants and to run away? And, I laugh because that's what the woo-woo is to me. And yeah, it's a Bush way of intimidating someone and teasing them in a time of need. They're in a crisis. They're afraid. They were afraid, reminiscing about what happened to them with a Sasquatch. No, what I'm doing is I'm bushing them up. I'm toughing them on up. Because if you make that jump from a Sasquatch enthusiast to a researcher, I know when I hear something or anything, the first thing I'm doing is I'm farting away with my cell phone or my camera as I'm running towards the supposed creature, which I think might be a Sasquatch Bigfoot. So one time I had trees being shook. I didn't run away. I didn't see orbs. I didn't see cloaking. I didn't see all the UFOs come landing to pick up this supposed Sasquatch that was shaking these two alder trees. I run towards it. And I'm trying to get my camera going. So when I do put this thing on the jig and I got him, and we're eyeball to eyeball, I'm going to get some document proof of this thing and, get hopefully the question finally solved once and for all. Well, I never did get my picture because all I heard was a D8 cat going about 40 miles an hour through the bush away from me. So in other words, that creature, be it bear, be it a wolf, be it another human, be it a Sasquatch Bigfoot, I don't know what it was. I just know two alder trees about 4 inches in diameter were being shook pretty darn good. That thing got the hell out of there. Why? Because I turned the table on him. And to me, that's the difference between a Sasquatch Bigfoot enthusiast, weekend warrior, so to speak, or a true researcher. A true researcher, hell or high water, will get the bloody picture. And that's what it's all about when you get in, make that threshold, that line. And when you look at the guys, like Todd Neiss and Derek Randless and Dr. John Bindernagel and even Dr. John Meldrum, even though they might not be out in the bush all the time, their passion is so powerful. Their dedication, devotion to the subject of finding conclusive proof of Sasquatch Bigfoot is so powerful. When you're in their presence, it's almost like they have an aurora of glowing around them. Now, there's a woo-woo for you. It's all about the true Sasquatch passionate ones that are going after them. And that's the way I look at it.
Well, I'm going to challenge you on something here for a second. And I'm not saying this because I don't believe what you're saying. But you mentioned about true researchers and true scientific research. The theory of science here, Tom, is to rule out what it could or could not be. If we are choosing opinion to rule out what you would call the woo-woo factor, that's not scientific at all. In fact, it hasn't been proven, because I can tell you with my own personal experience, 5 days after I saw two Sasquatch within 100 feet of me, we noticed pixelation standing right by a cherry tree. And 30 seconds after that pixelation, which is exactly the way the Chehalis First Nations band explains the shape-shifting, which you do not believe in, okay, we heard the roar. Follow it. And when I've talked to other First Nations people about that, they have a very differing opinion than what you have. And I guess my point and what I'm saying is, if we're going to be conducting real scientific research on this, which I believe you are doing, I believe Jeff Meldrum, Todd, John Bindernagel, whoever it is doing, my opinion on this is you cannot rule out if you haven't researched it. So explain to me where I'm missing something here.
I don't have capital D, small r period in front of Thomas, my name, and I don't have ologist after that, or all those capital and small letter periods after my name on my business card.
Me either.
I'm a bushman, Indian hunter. I'm a grunt. I'm on the ground doing it. Just like if I were a warrior in the battlefield, I'm just a grunt. It's up to the lieutenants, the colonels, the majors, the generals, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the commander-in-chief to dictate how we're going to do this. My role is, there's the direction, Tom, hell or high water. See if you can accomplish the objective. Find us conclusive proof. I leave the rest of it up to the other people. So, yes, I do. I would really like to sit down and be educated, that's Indian words for being smartened up a bit. I would like to be educated by a ologist with a capital D, small r period in front of their name, who studies the woo-woo aspects of the Sasquatch Bigfoot. I haven't met one yet. And yeah, some can counter that and say, well, your Sasquatch Island group, you forbid them on there. Yeah, it's my group. I'm the captain of it, and I rule my ship with an iron fist. I'm a commercial fisherman. I've been on boats all through the coast on every different fishery British Columbia has to offer. I've worked with some great captains. I've worked with some tyrants, but they're all the same. Their ship, when they're right, they're totally right. When they're wrong, they're completely right as well. And you always, yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full to your captain. You don't ever talk back at him, and you don't ever try to shove your opinion down his throat and make him change his outlook on life. So I have an open mind, though. Like I say, if that capital D, small r period, or an ologist in the woo-woo factor wants to sit down with me and not debate with me, but educate me, I'm open mind. I'm all ears. But I haven't found that yet. I found a lot of people with dream catchers hanging off your rear view mirrors trying to shove down my throat sideways their opinion when it comes to the woo-woo. And this Bushman don't take kindly to that.
Oh,
you gotta remember, I'm an Indian.
Hey, I can tell you right now, I would feel totally safe going into the bush with you. And when you come up north here, we are going into an area where it is highly populated with not only Sasquatch, but grizzly bears and very, very big cougars as well. So I have no problem going into the bush with you. I would feel safe. But I guess what I'm trying to explain is, in my opinion, and I've talked to a number of scientists, including one that's on my Spaced Out Radio team, and we have discussed this ad nauseum, okay, about the whole what is Bigfoot type of creature. What is it? And I see a lot of these scientists out there absolutely refusing and refuting the whole aspect of the supernatural when they haven't even researched it. And I guess, Tom, out of respect, that's what I'm trying to figure out here is, why is it thrown in the garbage can before it's even been used? And maybe you're not the guy to answer that, and I'm okay with that, because your experiences from everything that I've heard are not only incredible, however, you're from everybody I've talked to about you, you're a madman in the bush trying to find this creature, which I think is needed. So at what point, as you say, you're not ruling it out, but it just sounds a little too cartoonish for you, if that's what we could say?
If I don't keep my mind crispy in the bush and focused, I could die. So that being said, if I try to think on too many different planes about my quarry, like when I used to go grizzly bear hunting, there was no girlfriend that I spent the weekend with the weekend before. There was no cell bill that I needed to pay 2 days before. There's no, gee, what am I going to have for dinner? I'm going after that grizzly bear, and I'm going to keep my guide safe, and I'm going to get him a trophy. That's it. Meat and potatoes, straight up, no gravy. So when it comes to the Sasquatch Bigfoot, I'm not a weekend warrior. Like, I'm going to Vancouver Island here in 2 days, and I'm going in the bush. I'm going into the bush. I know Monday I have to be out for a meeting in the morning with someone on a wolf photo shoot for a bunch of magazine photographers, so I'll come out for that. But I'm going to go right back in again. Like I said, I don't have a pot to pee in financially. I got no money until herring season, so there's no use being the concrete road, because everywhere you turn, someone's got their hand out for cash. So I might as well go into the bush where everything I need is out there, and go do my thing. So when it comes to, like what you said, I got to stay crispy, and I can't get my mind going down different tracks. I can't be worried about the 210 of a nation of 10,000 clockwork you want that loathe me because I'm getting all this media time, and I'm getting successful in my tourism operations with Umumu Adventures, because we do grizzly bear and whale watch tours and sea kayaking, but now we've branched into Sasquatch, Bigfoot, day expeditions, multi-day expeditions, from a walking tour in Seattle right up to a $3,000 a day for a yacht. So when they see the websites and they read this, it's not, oh, way to go, Tommy. It's, oh, that son of a beat. Who the hell does he think he is? He's trying to be like a white guy, some big egghead with all these yachts and on TV and on Facebook and podcasts and internet radio and on and on and on. I can't worry about that. My role is that grunt. I got to try to get some conclusive proof. Not to mention with HamumuAdventures.com, I'm getting a lot of people that are in the concrete worlds that are Sasquatch, Bigfoot aficionados, if you want to call them, enthusiasts, and they want, like, what I teach people. When Christopher Columbus and Lewis and Clark came to the New World, when Christopher Columbus stepped out, his manuscripts say that he hired an Indian guide. Lewis and Clark, they hired Carbonieu and Sacagawea, and they went across the continent. In Canada, it was Alexander Mackenzie, and he hired Indian guides. So if you're a non-bush person, non-native, if you're going to go into the bush and try to find the world's greatest hide-and-seek player, would you not want to do like Lewis and Clark and hire a real Indian guide? Well, Tom Sewid, without the D, capital D, small r in front of his name, without the alphabets after his name either, he's just a meat and potatoes bushman. And he's got a lot of experience that he is the modern-day best Indian guide for Sasquatch Bigfoot on Vancouver Island, which I call Sasquatch Island because there's so many reports up there. So that's how I'm answering your question. It's all about focus. Like right now, all these protesters over President Donald Trump, you know, get a job, get back to work, get a life, quit worrying about it. Let the commander-in-chief, the new captain on the USS America, let him get his ship in order. Let him get his course set. Let him box his compass. Let him batten down his ship if he needs to because there's another war on the horizon. But for God's sake, give him time to do his job, and that's to talk to his advisors and his generals and everyone else, and then give him time. He'll come back to us all and tell us what direction we're going to be going on, but it's not the time to protest. And that's what Sasquatch Bigfoot is. It's not the time to debate the issue of woo-woo or no woo, spirituality or critter. I'm taking this path here. It's heartbeat. It has blood. It breathes. And I'm going to get a picture of it or a video of it. That's simple. And that's how I have to stay focused. Otherwise, if I start chasing things around like a protester, I ain't going to get nothing done. And my job is to go be a grunt and get out there and get you guys some good evidence, or at least get you a good area. There's some good activities so I can use the modern day smoke signal, Sasquatch Island, and other groups and podcasts and internet radio and whatever else to get word to all of you guys out there, like I'm doing with Sasquatch Island, is get your butts out here. I found some good areas where we can possibly find these things. And let's work together and cooperate and get conclusive proof and settle it once and for all.
Let's get to another question here from our audience, and I think this is a good one. Rachel is asking, maybe it's Raquel. I don't know. Rachel or Raquel? Raquel. Oh. Either way, she wears a nice baseball cap in her picture. She says, Tom, you're describing this creature as highly aggressive. Most say it's purely territorial. Do you claim that it can be violent and territorial?
Yes. When you read Diane Fossey's book and Jane Goodall's and others that have studied primates, you see the traits of the primates to deter conflict, to turn away threat, and then it gets elevated to, okay, now the bluff charge is coming, and then it might not be a bluff charge. Next thing you know, you got a chimpanzee on you tearing your face off with its teeth and its fingers. So, I'm not saying it's a primate. Let's get that clear right now because I don't know. Might be a relic humanoid, might be a primate. We don't know yet. So, but anyway, all animals, they're aggressive. You get a little mink cornered in your 26-foot trailer on Village Island, and he wants to poop in every corner of that trailer because you've been gone for 4 days, and it's now his trailer. And you go in there with a pair of leather gloves on and grab that mink finally. Well, you have the devil incarnate in your hand, because that thing rips through that leather, and before you get him out the door, you're bleeding and spewing blood all over that trailer. Everything will fight for its life. That's the bush law. And Sasquatch, Bigfoot, they're an apex predator. They're apex omnivore. And their clan, they're territorial. I firmly believe that their territories are based on watersheds on Vancouver Island and on the mainland, which is the inlet area. And in between is the Broughton Archipelago. And the Broughton Archipelago is the small, on a chart, basically goes from Campbell River at central part of Vancouver Island all the way up to its northern reaches. And it's shaped like a funnel. Down at Campbell River, it's narrow, and up at the top end, it's very wide. And there's like 1,000 islands there. So the years I was out there and I didn't have TV, and I was looking at the native boundaries, which are established in our Umich Cultural Center on a big map they used to have on the wall, because there's 18 tribes of the Kwakwaka'wakw Nation. And then you see out in the territories like me, because I'm running around in the speedboat all the time, and when I had my water taxi tour boat, you see pictographs, which are ochre paintings. You see petroglyphs, which are the rock carvings. You see prominent points. And then when you go to the Umich Cultural Center and you see how everything jives, that those pictographs and petroglyphs and prominent points are all signposts establishing the boundaries of the different tribes. Mamliacha, Kwekwasanuk, Mumpagila, Mamliacha, Numgis, Wallace Qualyot, and so forth. And last year, I was sitting there with my wife in Kent, Washington. Here we have this big map of Puget Sound, Washington State, all the way up to northern Vancouver Island. And I was just talking about what I speculate and the different migrations that are taking place according to the monthly protein high accumulations that were coming on every year. And then all of a sudden I started talking about, here's our tribal boundaries, because she asked, where are your tribal boundaries? And I'm saying it, and all of a sudden I stood back and I went, holy beep. Holy. I just figured something out. The sighting reports that I've gathered over the last 30 or so years, such as One Eye, the one that has his eyes shot out, the one that was really tall and skinny, and this one and this family group, I said, it almost looks like their clan boundaries, their territories, correlate to the Kwakwaka'wakw tribal territories, which are all, the Kwakwaka'wakws are established on seasonal monthly harvest of proteins and watersheds, prominent points, and clam beaches. And that's one of the things I got to talk to one of those capital D, small r periods before his name's about, ornithologist, so that they can get a computer software and I establish these boundaries up and the sighting reports and then overlay it. Then hopefully we can find out for sure, because I can't do everything. That's what I'm saying. You got to reach out to the people that are smarter than you. And then we can sit back and maybe we'll have a computer model of the probability of Sasquatch Bigfoot clans in and around northeastern Vancouver Island. And because the Sasquatch Island is getting so popular, and what we said the last two questions ago about the Indians, some like me, some don't. Well, Modern Day Smoke Signal, I have a book in front of me right now with 38 entries since December. They're all fellow First Nations on Vancouver Island that I have to go sit down and talk with and hear their sighting reports and stories. And they're from the two other tribes, including my own. So hopefully I helped your question there.
You mentioned earlier that you feel there are way too many weekend warriors heading into the forest looking for this creature. I would agree with you on that. It seems that everyone really, due to television, believes that they're going to be the one who gets that next Patterson Gimlin film or gets that quality photograph that shows that something is truly going on. Do you believe that television has hurt or enhanced Sasquatch hunting?
Enhanced, totally. So I don't really, BFRO for number one. Wow. They've brought our Sasquatch Bigfoot genre, I guess you'd call it, or interest, they've brought it to prime time. That's monstrous. So yeah, no, they've definitely done a lot of good for us. Except for the fact that I'm afraid to scratch my package or my bum out in the bush now. I might be on someone's trail camera.
That is true. That is true. You never know where those cameras are hiding these days. You know.
Yeah.
The reason why I ask that is because I know in paranormal study, when it comes to ghost hunting, there is a big issue with the way things are done on the television shows. And I remember talking to John Bindernagel in 2015 at a Paracon, and I asked him point blank what he felt about these television shows, and he was not impressed with all of them. In fact, he felt they were doing much of a disservice to the 60-plus years of research that he had put into it. So that's why I was wondering your opinion, because yes, it is getting people active, it is getting people outside, it is getting people curious, and the more people who are curious, there is a better chance of proving it. I do get that. But at what point do we have to say enough is enough? Because there are too many people, in my opinion right now, my opinion only, maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you won't, that's okay, that are literally hanging out in the forests, don't know what the hell they're doing, they have no safety training, and they're going to kill a Bigfoot. That's their goal. They're out to shoot a Bigfoot because they want to be the one who brings in the body. That's where it gets dangerous.
Greed. Yeah, it's greed and ego, you know. Whoever gets conclusive proof, you know, you've got a scratch-and-win ticket with who knows how much money is going to come in spades. And ego, yeah, you get your picture on the front of a cover of a magazine and you get on TV and, you know, maybe Oprah Winfrey comes out of retirement to interview you. Who knows? You know, it's, you know, I was, you know, like when I was at the conference, I looked around and, you know, I seen some of these guys dressed out in some pretty fine duds and camel, something I could only wish to afford. And I was thinking, you know, guy looks good, you know, but, you know, does the guy have the biscuits in the package to carry himself out in the bush with me? Nah, I doubt it. And that's what it's all about. It's like there's some good bushers, you know, Derek Randless with the Olympic Project, you know, he does expeditions. Todd Neiss with the American Primate Conservancy, he mentioned tonight, and he's told me many, many times about his boat that him and his wife have purchased for the Conservancy to do expeditions in the Pacific Northwest and island chains. You know, me with Hamumu Adventures, Sasquatch Island, we're doing expeditions, and there's a few others I see out there, and there's going to be 20 more by the end of next year because we need it. You know, like, there's no way if I'm going to go look for Bigfoot, I'm going to go where those guys in Walmart Camo are right now with their guns that want to shoot it. I haven't even watched the program. I just heard some of the reviews on it, and I watched it a couple of years ago, one of their pilots. I was like, no, I ain't watching that. And, you know, if you're going to go look for it, you know, you're not going to go hunt out there. It's like one of my friends, when I went back east, he goes, hey, let's go hunting for mule deer. And I was like, yeah, okay. And all of a sudden he starts giving me camouflage coating and hats that were fluorescent orange. And I'm like, what's this camo? He goes, oh, it's the law. We have to wear it because there's so many hunters out there. I'm like, yeah, okay, you guys have fun. I'll be here watching the football game. You know, I'm a bushman. I'm not going to go hunt where I might get hunted myself, shot by some fool. So with Sasquatch researching, with Sasquatch Island, when you read it and sit down with your 2 beers or your couple coffees or teas or whatever you're drinking, and you got asked to join it first because I'm pretty strict about who gets on there. You know, I scrutinize some of these people that want to get on there, and I'm just like, nope, you're not accepted, but 99% get accepted on there really quickly because I hear it on my phone. But when you read through it, you're going to see that Vancouver Island of Pacific Northwest is very unique. And like I told them at the conference the other day, you know, I wish them all the luck in Philadelphia and Kentucky, but I honestly believe it's going to be the Pacific Northwest, probably Vancouver Island North region, that's going to come up spades with conclusive proof from it. You know, right now I have 7 different reported activity areas on Vancouver Island since I've been in Kent, Washington for the last 3.5 weeks, and I'm just chomping at the bit to get up there. So if you really want to help find these things, you know, the Derek Randlesses, the Todd Nices, the Tom Sewids, hey, we're your modern-day Sasquatch Bigfoot guides. Give us a holler on the internet, and we'll be happy to take you out. And, that's going to separate the ones that are going to get shot by a fool and the ones that might actually come up spades on these creatures.
We only have about 5 minutes left with you here tonight, my friend. And I'm sure we could go another hour or two with you. I know Corey in the chat room is absolutely loving you tonight. And I'm wondering, do you believe then that Sasquatch is truly that smart to be the reigning hide-and-seek champion, or are we just not experienced enough in the bush to actually find out what he's truly up to?
On March 7th, on my birthday, when you have me on again, I'll bring that up again, that question. I'm going to enlighten you with my last encounter with them. And I surprised the hell out of them instead of having a table turned like it usually is. And, we have to think outside of the box. Like last month, I was doing, the 1st of January, I was doing an expedition with a gentleman on Vancouver Island, and we just had a 1 to 2 feet of snow dumped all over Vancouver Island, and some of the snow had been there for almost 2.5 weeks. This is unprecedented. We're almost palm trees out there. It's so nice. And anyway, I'm sitting there going, God damn, I can't go. Oh, sorry about saying that. But anyway, I go, God, I can't figure this out. I can't go to the areas where snow because from my research, Vancouver Island Sasquatches don't like snow. They either disappear or they're always tracks walking downhill into the ocean and disappear, and they swim across to the islands, which are out of the snow zone. So I'm like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I said, hey, I know. I'll go look on the internet under the highway cameras. So I looked on the highway cameras of Vancouver Island, and I found 3 areas that were green. 2 on the west coast of Vancouver Island and 1 up in northeastern. And because the 2 on the west coast of Vancouver Island you had to go over mountains, and there's one place to get there, snow roads were just terrible. I chose northern Vancouver Island. We came up spades. We got 1 pretty good frontal track with toes, and we got 1 probable track in Forest Tuft, muddy area, and we got a possible bedding rest area, and we pretty sure we heard a whoop that night when we were at this estuary that was low tide was happening. So we were putting our chips on where they're going to come out of the bush for high protein estuary this time of the year. Steelhead were in the river, and it wasn't raining, so the river was down. We saw the pool. That was like half a mile up from the saltwater. The estuary was filled with ducks and geese and swans, which are a known food source of Sasquatch Bigfoot. And at low tide, an hour and a half after dark that night, was going to be this great shellfish beast exposed. So, that's how you got to look at it. You got to think out of the box. Use those highway cameras, because I can't speak for every region, only mine, but my region, they don't like snow. And, use like me. I got the Moccasin Telegraph with the modern day smoke signal internet. I got all these fellow natives on Vancouver Island and elsewhere that are just chomping at the bit to have me show up. Number one, they want to get their picture of me with Facebook, which is cool. I like that, and then they can also tell me their stories, and then we can share our information and go do some research and some investigating. And then, there's cooperation. You got a Kwak-Kwak-Ewok working with the New Chanlith, a Kwak-Kwak-Ewok working with Coast Salish. That's not our culture. Our culture is that, we've always been basically battling with them. Nowadays, we battle with them in the metamorphical form of warfare, the basketball tournament and the soccer tournament. But now we're going to be out there not battling. We're going to be working together and cooperating. And that's what it's all about. And that's why some of this infighting on different Sasquatch Bigfoot groups has to end. Like my group, a lot of people are really impressed that commanding it like a commercial fish captain with an iron fist the way I do. Hey, there's no whining, there's no bitching, there's no backstabbing on my group, because I don't allow it. It's all about cooperation, trying to achieve the final goal. And that's conclusive proof of the Sasquatch. And like I say, Sasquatch Island, please come to it. It's a great site. Ask me questions, what you want to hear about. I'll be glad to talk about it. And if I can't, I'll never lie. I'll say, I don't know. I'll go talk to the people, meaning the elders and others that are First Nation. As far as the sciences part, I leave it for the capital D, small r periods in front of their names. You talk to them. American Primate Conservancy, I joined it because they have the same views I do. Todd Neiss and his wife, Diane, they're great people for information. Derek Randless with the Olympic Project and Mr. Ellis. They just floored me with what they taught me last weekend at Squatch Fest. So that's what I'm getting at is, if someone needs a verbal beep slapping, give it to them in text or vocally on a phone or in person better. But don't get to that belittling and backstabbing and pettiness on there and, joke, but don't be mean and vindictive in your sarcasm and that. And that's all I'm saying. We all got to educate ourselves on how to properly conduct ourselves because we have a big game of hide and seek there and we're losing.
I hear you there, and I know Rachel, our brand new listener, will be excited that you're coming back on March 7th, which is a Tuesday night. She was really pumped up to hear you speak tonight. Tom, thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio. We say thank you to Todd Neiss, who was on earlier today. Tom, you hold on. I got to wrap this thing up here.
Okay, so listeners know my language, halakulisla. Go in peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you're listening on the Space Out Radio side, you're hearing Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy. He brings us in and out of every single radio show we do on a nightly basis. Keep up the great work, Mr. B. Looking forward to some new tunes very soon. Tomorrow night on the show, Brett Butler. Yes, the actress, the psychic, will be with us. It's going to be a weird show tomorrow night. I don't know where it's going. I'm sure she does if she's psychic. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time, right here at spacedoutradio.com. Remember, if you want to catch our archives, go to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Tune us in on TuneIn or download this show and others on iTunes, because that's where we kind of store them. That's just what we do. Thank you so much for all of your questions out there. If you're taking part in the chat rooms and on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio, like you, Derek, like you, Skeptic, like you, John, like you, Rahonda, Moog Boy, or Moog Boy, whatever your name is, Lulu Bell. Who else is out there? Canadian Joe. Let's find one more. Dennis Koch. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good one. We'll talk to you tomorrow night in 21 hours from now. Bye!